Hello. Welcome once again to the Normal America Show. I'm your host, robnoerr. Midday edition. Skinner says got permission from the wife. Begrudgingly, I did. It's funny, I've heard Destiny say before that his mom disagrees with him on political stuff. He'll say that some of the stuff I'm saying sounds like stuff his mom says. In that sense, we're similar in that my wife could give two craps less about my streaming. But no, she's cool. I'm only able to do this because of her. It's not easy having a toddler, a 2-year-old running around. So, she takes the brunt of that while I'm at work and while I'm doing this streaming and stuff like that. So I am appreciative, and I always want to make sure that it fits into her schedule when I'm doing stuff. So thanks to her for letting me come up and do this. Yeah, that's what I've said to Destiny. His mom sounds cool. She should watch my show. Call in, talk to me, I'd talk to her. But we'll see. I'm supposed to be talking around 2:30 here to Destiny. I don't know. Yesterday's discussion was more just outlining of facts. Maybe we'll get to more debate today. Just from reading what people had been saying about the conversation, I gather that Destiny's possibly gearing up to debate someone like Ben Shapiro or something like that. I'll tell him this too, maybe. Full disclosure, when I debate someone, I want to win. Most importantly, I want to have fun and enjoy it. But I also want the truth to come out. And so I will be sending Destiny a bunch of documents today that I think is worth him reading, knowing full well that his bias will allow him to look at those documents and say, there's nothing to see here. But I'll at least send it to him. And he can make his own conclusion from there. I'm not trying to intentionally withhold evidence from people to spring it on them in some sort of debate or something. I don't do that. Oftentimes you could see I'll even announce, hey, I got a debate coming up next Tuesday. This is exactly what my opening position will be. I'm not really one to, it's different in collegiate debate when I did that. That part of the strategy sometimes is, oh, we got a new argument that no one knows about that we're going to spring on them in this round. But that's not what we're doing here, really. So, anyway, so I think where I want to start today is to sort of argue why I think the facts that I outlined justify an investigation into not just Joe Biden, but answers as to exactly what the FBI did in their investigation, and pointing out the double standard of how the FBI treats Trump-connected people versus Biden. Remember, that's my key focus. And I think it's funny, I saw people saying in comments, like, oh, Rob says he doesn't care about Hunter Biden, but that's all he talks about. One, that's not all I talk about. It's what I've been talking about a lot lately because there's an impeachment inquiry. It was obvious that this is the direction that things were going to go. I'm sorry that I had my finger on the pulse and was able to talk about this corruption way back in 2019 when they impeached Trump about this. I was able to discuss these things. So, yeah, but the joke is, how could Rob say he doesn't care about Hunter Biden if he's talking about this a lot? Because what it represents is a double standard at the FBI. Like, if I say I am concerned most about a corrupt FBI, I have to provide evidence of that corruption. If I had to bet, is Biden getting impeached? I would say no. Not right now. It's difficult, though. He's definitely not going to be convicted of it. He's not going to be removed by the Senate. Will there be enough votes in the House? Probably not, because there's probably 30 or so Republicans that are establishment Republicans that will say, we don't want a tit for tat. But it's sort of irrelevant. There's zero chance he gets removed from office. What is possible to happen, the best case scenario for what this could do, is Biden issues pardons to his son and himself and people connected to this and says, but I'm not going to run in 2024. I still believe that they're looking for an out, that the sort of establishment people running the Democratic Party realize that at this point Biden's an albatross around their neck. And I think that they'll be happy if the focus of these impeachment inquiries is solely on Joe Biden and not referencing these double standards at the FBI and things like that, because that will allow them to say, okay, Joe Biden's not there now. There's a new candidate. So don't worry about it. It's all done with now. But that's just me. So anyways, I will continue to hammer the point that I understand that people may disagree with my conclusions. I don't think there's anything that I said yesterday that's not backed up by facts. You could disagree with my interpretation of what that means. But when I said what the Durham report said, I was basically spot on with what it said. When I said what Devin Archer's testimony said, I was basically spot on, right? You could say, but I don't think that justifies corruption, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. I will argue and debate you why I think you're wrong. But the minimum that I'm trying to get is an admission that an investigation is warranted. Because the current stance is not only is it fine that there wasn't a big FBI investigation that investigated Biden, et cetera, but we don't even want an impeachment inquiry. And I think that's an absurd position. It's obviously done through, what I would consider partisan hackery. Let me check my phone here. Where is it? Oh, in my pocket. See if he's ready to get started. So anyways, that's the direction we'll go. For God's sakes. See where he's at in his live stream. I don't want to interrupt. All right, let's see. Okay. Maybe about ready. I don't know. All right, you said he's almost ready. So, but thanks. I'm glad you thought I did good. Yeah, I enjoy outlining the case. I enjoy debating more. And I'll even tell Destiny if that's the case. If he's preparing for a debate, honestly, let me switch this. Honestly, if I had to recommend who he should talk to, other than me, to get this side of the argument. Probably Pisco's the person who, even though I think his arguments are garbage, at least he's delving into the specifics. I think the types of arguments that I'm used to getting, whether it be in that debate with I'm Really Important and Straighter A the other day, which is just like, but jury found guilty, so that's it. Not looking into the specifics. Or, what Destiny seemed to be trying to do last night a little was just like, well, we don't know. Maybe the FBI did investigate. Those aren't good arguments. It's not convincing to anyone. It's only convincing to people that want to be willfully blind, as far as I'm concerned. So the arguments that people have tried to make are like, well, Shokin was corrupt. Or everyone wanted Shokin fired before Joe Biden, so it's okay to issue this quid pro quo. Those, at least if they could be proven, are some sort of defense. I don't think either of those, if you would totally concede both, would still rise to the level of not wanting an investigation into Biden. That's what I feel. Yeah, right, Legowski. Right, Beavis Frequency. Well, that's not even... You're almost right, Tim, but the truth is the establishment Republicans, the Mitch McConnell class, they're not interested. Didn't McConnell already come out and say he doesn't think there should be an impeachment inquiry? So it's even worse.
I'm dragging in Rob too. You guys can both do this, okay? We can all do this at the same time. I'm just curious. I have no strong position here, so maybe he has strong thoughts on this too. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, hit me up. Wait, Rob, can you hear us?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Okay, yeah. He's got feelings about Israel. I think a few days ago I said that I feel like the only solution to Israel-Palestine is Israel basically just slowly solidifying the hold on the territory they have. Palestinians basically just kind of being ass mad that they're slowly getting kicked out, and that more or less the borders that exist now, with maybe some exceptions to some parts of the West Bank that Israel doesn't care about, maybe slowly goes back to the Palestinians, but things like the Golan Heights and everything are never changing hands, and nobody around the world is going to enforce it, and we're just moving in that direction. Yeah, that's kind of my position. And then Lonerbox had an issue with that, so...
So when I heard you say that, because I rewatched the VOD before I joined in, and it did sound like you were kind of saying that you were asked what should happen, and I think you described it yourself as like having like a radicalized position. It felt like when I was speaking to you about it in the moment that you'd kind of moved on to this just seems like the most likely thing.
Oh,
So
I was saying, I think I was giving that as a counter to you saying it was a ridiculous position, but I do think that's probably what should happen. I haven't heard a good argument for what should happen in contrast to that. Short of, like, everybody in the Middle East fucking chills the fuck out. Like, if there wasn't such a threat to Jewish people in the Middle East, I think I would be like, okay, they need to probably give some of this land back or all of this land back and then kind of like work out some solutions. But yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay. So just to be clear, like the reason I called the position ridiculous, or I think the word was retarded, but I think the reason I said that was because it was the should statement, because I don't really know how you could advocate for this position of like which basically necessitates either ethnically cleansing or genociding like millions of people.
Does ethnically genocide or does genocide or ethnic cleansing, is that necessitated if we're just talking about expulsion or
expulsion is ethnic cleansing, isn't it? It would be a part. Yeah,
I'm just making sure. When I hear ethnic cleansing, I think of like killing fields, like murdering and everything. But you mean ethnic cleansing could just be like mass deportation of people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
What do you mean by genocide?
Genocide's like when you deliberately kill them, like wipe them out, right?
Well, so you're saying it would lead to ethnic cleansing and genocide?
One or the other would be necessitated by my position.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing I had a problem with, is saying that this is what should happen, because I think saying that should happen, that Israel should just grab more and more of what they've already occupied, like in the West Bank. To me, I think it's a horrible position for the Palestinians to advocate for, but it's also actually, I think, even a little bit self-destructive to Israel, because it's a massive gamble, especially if you're like a pro-Israel person, because as soon as you start doing that, as soon as you start annexing, realistically, you're not deporting millions of people like anytime soon, and they're going to demand voting rights. And internationally, voting rights is a very difficult thing to argue against. And if they get the voting rights, then Israelis will quickly become either a minority or not big enough for like a big majority, that the whole Jewish state, like Zionist dream, dies with it. So that's the big it's the should thing I have a problem with, rather than like...
What do you think should happen? What is like outline me like 3 scenarios above this, or just one, I guess, for what you think should happen?
I'll give you 2. So one is that we go with what is still kind of an international consensus that doesn't get enforced, which is stop the expansion of settlements, try and pull back on the ones that at least Israel considers illegal, like the outposts.
Wait. I want to bring up maps so that we can, just so I have like an eye for all this. Okay, hold on, because I might just geographically. Okay, when we talk about where all the settlements are these settlements that are typically like right outside Jerusalem, like to the east, or are these settlements that are more like to the north or south, like east of Tel Aviv, or where are like the settlements that people fight over all the time? Can you tell me?
They're all scattered throughout the West Bank. It's like Area C. If you look up a map of areas A, B, and C in the West Bank, they're all in Area C, very much.
Okay, hold on. You said most of them are in Area C?
That map is probably not going to show you Area C. Yeah.
I'm just kind of... Man, this is what am I looking at? Is this the Gaza Strip, this little white thing here?
I'll maybe find you a link. Hang on. Wait, what the fuck is that one? Shit, let me find you a map. Hang on.
How are we getting 3-dimensional cross-sectional analysis maps of? I feel like I'm looking at a biology class slide.
Just Google Area C map and go to images, like the top fucking 10 or
map.
Area C.
Damn,
like...
don't be so mean. Chill. Hold on. Okay. Area C map. Okay, so is it the red thing? No, wait. I'm sorry, hold on.
Your
Area
stream's a bit
C is
delayed.
blue and light blue. East Jerusalem is in red.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one.
Wait,
yeah.
so there are hold on. So there are Israeli settlements all the way out here, all
I
over
think
the
most
West
of
Bank?
them are in the western side.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you can look at if you look up areas Israel settlements map, yeah, they are, but they go all the way through as well and into the east. Yeah, some of them are actually near the Jordan River. So yeah, they're kind of all over the shop. This is why
Gotcha. Okay, go ahead.
Israel keeping so one position that is like maybe the Israeli right wing position, which is just that they take Area C, right? Because that's what Israel already controls, and they leave A and B to the Palestinians. That's what gives you the Trump peace plan. You can look at that map as well. It just looks like a kind of batshit
Wait, where
like
is I need
leopard
to
print
see-
map.
I need
That
to
would
see
be all the
area.
white places being
Oh,
Palestinian.
okay. That sounds like a clusterfuck. All right.
Yeah.
How, like, also, can I just give me for my mind on this, okay? How big is this whole area in comparison to like a state? Like, if I go from the north of the West Bank all the way down to the south of the West Bank, what is like the West Bank? Like, what is the size here?
It's not.
Because
It's a
I'm
bit
looking
smaller
at this
than
on a map and
Lebanon.
it looks really big, but then I see down here the scale here is kilometers. Is like
Yeah.
all the way from the north to south. Are we just talking like a few hundred kilometers?
It's a bit smaller than Lebanon, so yeah, it takes maybe not more than 2 hours to drive all the way.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I know exactly how big Lebanon is. I've driven across it so many times.
I'm referencing it for myself, just my thought process.
Okay. Can you do this in like terms of like Florida's or Texas's for me?
Driving for 2 or 3 hours will get you across the whole place. I think.
Okay, we'll get you from
one
top
the
to
other.
bottom for this.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, crazy.
Not more than
Okay.
2 hours, I think. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that's pretty wild. All right.
That's also why, like, a lot of the refugees, even from back in '48, like, there's a whole thing where you get these photographs where they're basically in a refugee camp and they can still see the ruins of their old villages from like across the field. Yeah, it's pretty.
Gotcha.
It's a small area.
Okay. All right. Hit me. Okay. So hit me up with your thing you were saying. You said the
So-
Trump one of Jews keep Area C and the Palestinians are in this like leopard print is probably not good.
Probably
right?
not. No. So I'd say what's the more, I guess, like the American liberal or like center left position would be that they pull back on, they stop expanding settlements for one. They pull back on the illegal ones, which are about maybe 100 of them, and then illegal by Israeli standards. And then they kind of work out like a land swap thing, a settlement on Jerusalem, a settlement on refugees, and then they go with that, which is what like they've come fairly close to in the past. This is kind of what was the peace process of the 90s and 2000s. So that's one option, 2 states.
Okay. Wait. So repeat that. So Jews pull back from the illegal settlements, which are you said most of them or
No, it's like 100 out of 350, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
The outpost that Israel considers illegal. Yeah.
okay. Where is the on this map? Where is the Golan Heights on this map? Yeah, in comparison to
North.
Jerusalem.
See
Is it
where
directly-
Jenin is on the north? Yeah, it's just north of the West Bank. But north of there's a bit of Israel,
okay,
then
okay.
there's Golan Heights.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's north of Jenin. There's the Golan Heights.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah, that's one. I think Israelis are still fairly split. I think there's maybe a bit less than half of them believe in stopping the settlements. I think half of the parties believe that. They're all fucked out of power right now. But as for Palestinians, they used to be mostly in support of that solution. They're a lot more skeptical of it now because of how much of a failure it was in the past. But yeah, that's one possible solution that I think is worth pushing for before the annexation thing. The other one.
Oh wait,
is,
my internet just blipped for a second. Hold on, it's coming back.
Okay.
Chill. Just calm yourself for a microsecond. You can still hear me, right?
But I also see a lot of Fs in your chat. Oh no.
Is my kick stream still up?
Don't know.
Oh, sometimes YouTube is weird. I don't know why I did that. Okay, my kick stream is still up, I think. Weird. Okay. All right. Go. Okay. Also, I'm so sorry. Okay, so repeat that last thing one more time. I was looking at the map, getting it, and I have it in my. Okay, so repeat what you said. Like the liberal thing was. Repeat that one thing. I've got it. Now.
Yeah, that's it. Like it's pull back on settlements, negotiate land swaps so Israel can keep the larger settlements in exchange for land elsewhere.
Okay.
Settlement on Jerusalem. Usually there's something like Palestinians get the Palestinian majority areas, Jews get the Jewish majority areas. There's some kind of like open city plan. Settlement on refugees, and then that's like the 2-state solution that is mostly popular amongst like center left.
Gotcha.
Was very popular
Can you
with
tell me
Palestinians. Not so much
when you
anymore.
say
Yeah.
pull back on the most pull back on the most illegal settlements or whatever, would this give, so just totally like a fucking retard opinion, but like I feel like no plan works unless you have like a whole country that's like connected start to finish. What you just said, would that give you like a decent chunk of Palestinian land, or would it still be like split into like 3 different weird fucking bodies of area?
Most of the maps I've seen, it looks like Palestinians keep like 97% of the West Bank. Like that was a lot of the plans from.
Oh, okay.
So it's quite small. Like the very big settlements, there aren't that many of them, and they could just connect to Israel. Yeah.
Okay.
The connection would have to be Gaza and the West Bank. Yeah.
Gotcha. When I look at this area C map, are you saying that most of these blue and light blue areas have Jewish settlers in them?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So that you'd be pulling back quite a bit. Is it, just curious, when we talk about Jewish settlers, are they mostly a certain type of Jew? Like, are these like Orthodox Jews, or are they just like hip young Jews, or like is there like a particular type of Jews, or?
A lot of working class Jews. It's much cheaper to, not really work, but like it's cheaper to live in settlements. So people with families, but also the illegal settlements, like the ones that Israel considers illegal, they are there because they are religious nutcases who think it's their fucking homeland. That's the only reason they're there. Yeah.
And so most
and
people
they set up fucking tents and like portable boxes. And
Sorry
stuff,
to interject the flow of this, but I'm going to back out until you're ready to talk, Destiny. I don't want to be rude. I don't really have anything to add to this. So
yeah, you're fine. I'll message you as soon as I know this. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so I'll just talk to you all. I have no interest. Debates are best one-on-one. Leave them hash it out. My thoughts on Israel is, it's a complicated situation because I feel that both sides have terrible people in them and advocating for terrible things. And there's not really going to be an easy solution. I think the best solution we could offer as the United States is to do our best to stay out of it. Try to do the best we can to broker, proffer peace deals. But that's about it. I'm not really concerned with what countries around the world want to do with their own domestic policies and things like that. So, anyways, hopefully they don't take too long because I am going to be done by 4:30. I'm supposed to stream tonight at 8 p.m. What's up, Robert? With Pentultimate, I think's his name, or I'm screwing up the name. A new streamer who generously reached out to me, and Pentuple. So I can't. It's already more than I should be streaming, if I'm totally honest with you. And I'm getting a full slate. So Monday, I'm debating Pisco on the Burisma stuff. Tuesday, I'll be on Counterpoint's channel talking about sort of the scandals, the Durham report, things of that nature. So I'm supposed to talk to Akana Boy in the weeks coming here. So full slate, and I unfortunately don't have all the time in the world. I wish I had more time, but so I don't know what time Destiny started streaming. He asked me last night. He said around noon he would be streaming, so I had set aside time. It was like maybe from noon to 2. I wasn't able to get in touch with him, so I went out and did some mowing. I had to do some yard work, so I got that done, and then I came up and we were looking around 2 o'clock, and then he said he was going over something 2:30, but then apparently he had someone jump in here. So, whatever. I guess I'm not going to be too hard on him because my guess is there's probably 1 million people that are trying to get on his show all the time to talk about stuff, because the truth is he has one of the bigger audiences in this sphere, and so people want to jump on. I'm not going to bullshit you. It's nice to talk to a bigger audience. Why do I give someone like Destiny the time? Well, for example, I'll show you why I give someone like Destiny the time. You ready? We'll see if I could do this. So yesterday, I don't know how many people watched our live stream when I was on there, but probably for the first time, 80% of that audience actually heard the case laid out against Joe Biden. They actually heard Destiny, because of the way the debate was going, have to read the conclusions of the Durham report. Now, I know Destiny's not going to change his mind, and I also know that he's, quote, using me. That's okay, by the way. Everyone, to some extent, that's interacting in contents using someone. If Aftershock comes on and talks to me, in a sense, I'm using Aftershock for my content to some degree, you know. Now, the truth is I talk to Aftershock outside of streaming, so it's not like I only talk to him for content. But so I don't mind that. And I understand that he's prepping for a debate. And I think that it shows he knows who's someone that's very good on these issues from the other side. So despite all the, chatter from the constant left-wing audience about how dumb I am and bad, they all know I'm really good at debate. They all know I know what I'm talking about. They might disagree with me, but they're just coping when they talk about how I suck and stuff like that. I know that. Better keep my headset on for when he's... So I get on that, but I'll show you here. Here's the video that Destiny put up last night. Now, I would guess that 95% of his audience would be predisposed to disliking me and my opinions. Maybe not disliking me as an individual, but disliking the positions that I articulate. Here's some of the conversation from last night. People saying it was awesome content. They liked hearing it. Maybe I missed it, but Rahab repeatedly says, I know this isn't irrefutable proof of wrongdoing, but certainly it would warrant an investigation. And Destiny doesn't seem to answer that. 32 thumbs up. Who else from the liberal side would engage with Rob with not involuntarily attacking him? True. Rob's the guy to call every single bad argument. Name one bad argument he made. 47 thumbs up. It's not a bad argument if it's factual and convincing. To be fair, I think Rob's bad faith, but he gives better and more cogent arguments. The only point I'm trying to make is I don't really give a shit what like people in a different audience would say. But when I get a chance to reach an audience that's probably never heard the case outlined, and large portions of that audience are saying, look, I might disagree with Rob, but I understand what he's saying here. He outlined things in a factual way. I think that that's good. And I also think it's good when you could go after people that are high profile debaters on the left, or people whose opinions are heard a lot by people on the left. People like Destiny that's going on shows like Tim Pool that I'm trying to get on. And when I could go on and show that I have a mastery of the facts so much beyond what they do, and to outline my case, I think that's good for me going forward when I'm trying to get to a bigger audience, when I'm trying to get on a show like Tim Pool, or I'm trying to interact with like someone like Mike Cernovich, where I could show like, look, I'm not just avoiding people that are considered big debaters. To the contrary, I'm trying to go after the people that I think have the reputation on the left of being the best debaters. It's why I've been going after Mehdi Hassan on Twitter. Mehdi, he's got this reputation. He knows his facts. He eviscerates people when he interviews them. That's the narrative of the left. Okay, that's who I want to talk to. So that's why I would talk to someone like it. It's similar to why, it's not the same. Why I talk to Peace goes because he talks about the specific details, and that makes me have a better understanding and think more about the things. That's why I like talking to him about these things. Thanks, Samuel Monroe. And the other thing is this, and I know people don't want to hear this. It's just the truth. I don't personally dislike people because they disagree with me politically. There are people that disagree with me politically that I don't like. I don't like Vaj. I think he is unethical in the way that he argues. I think he's called for violence against people. And maybe Destiny's done that in some sense and I haven't seen it. I don't know. All I could say is people like Destiny or Dylan Burns or Pisco have not done anything to me outside the scope of saying I have dog shit arguments or things like that to make me dislike them horribly as a person. They may have done things to other people that I've commented on and said, I don't like that. But I just don't give a shit. In the sense that, like, who am I going to talk to if I'm just like, well, anyone that, these people all suck. Like, yeah, I think their political opinions do all suck. I think some of them are hacks. That's true. Skinner says, the only criticism that's fair about me is that I connect dots without hard proof sometimes. That's true. This is the sort of criticism that Sitch and Adam had for me, right? But I think that I prefer my style of looking at things versus the opposite, right? The opposite side is the sort of, unless we have a smoking gun, we can't comment. But the problem with that is if you have corrupt investigators, you'll never have a smoking gun then, right? The way to proceed, that's why my arguments, almost always, I leave the caveat. Even though in my gut, I might feel that someone is guilty or not guilty of something, they deserve a fair day in trial. And so what I'm talking about is these institutions and whether or not they should have been investigating. I don't know how a person who's trying to be completely objective and hears the cases outlined and sees the scope of the investigations we had against the last president, Donald Trump, can hear these facts and say, yeah, I don't think there should be an investigation into Joe Biden. Now, furthering beyond the scope of that, as far as do I personally believe that Joe Biden is guilty of the things I talk about? I do. But I can't sit here and tell you, well, here's the bank receipt from Zolchevsky that, $5 million and in the check memo, bribe for getting Shokin fired. No, I haven't seen that. I haven't. And I think that it's absurd to wait to comment until you get that level of evidence, particularly when that same benefit of the doubt is not given by people in positions of power when it comes to people like Donald Trump. Am I taking calls today? I am not, unfortunately. I'm supposed to be debating talking to Destiny about Burisma, but he had another caller. So any moment, hopefully now, he'll bring me in there. I have to be done by 4:30. I absolutely have to. Tonight at 8 o'clock for probably about an hour, I'll be talking to a new streamer. That won't really be a debate. I think we're just going to talk about how he got into politics. His first interest was Donald Trump. So it won't be as exciting as I'm sure we'll find something to disagree about, but it'll be more of a conversation. And then I'm going to take a break probably until Monday. An impeachment of Biden would be a terrible move right now. Well, I think that optically, I don't mind the impeachment of Biden. I think there needs to be an impeachment inquiry, which hopefully brings more evidence. But to me, the mistake would be having the primary focus be Joe Biden. The way to attack this is how all of the institutions covered for Joe Biden. Because I assume what you're saying, Pig Riser, is here's what happens. Joe Biden's actually the worst thing for the Democratic parties right now, which is sort of true. Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama or probably even Kamala Harris would be better candidates going into 2024 than Joe Biden. He's ran his course. People are tired of his shtick. They see that he's not in good health. He's a chronic liar. His policies have been dog shit. They see it, right? And so if you somehow got him removed, that would be arguably better for the Democrats. That's why I'm focusing on the institutions. Trump tried to overthrow the government, and you're busy with Burisma. And there you have it. There's your intelligent lefty. There it is. We can't focus on crimes of Joe Biden because I still think January 6th was an insurrection. We haven't talked about the January 6th insurrection enough. That's all we should talk about every day. January 6th insurrection. How about the FBI tried to overthrow the government? How about the FBI had unlawful FISA warrants that they used that they knew was sourced by a suspected Russian spy, paid for by Hillary Clinton's team, accusing Donald Trump of colluding with Russia, which was the actual crime that they knew Hillary Clinton had committed, colluding with Russians. But they used that collusion with Russians and that suspected Russian spy in order to get FISA warrants for the first time in the history of this country to spy on a presidential team. How about that? Were you talking about the overthrowing of the government then, or were you absolutely fine with that? I know the answer. But Trump questioned the election. That's like literally an insurrection. When the Democrats did it, when they said the election was stolen and they weaponized the FBI to spy on Trump, that was okay. That's right, Ken Simonson. That's exactly right. The same people that tell us, oh, you say you need an AR-15 to stop government tyranny. You'd never be able to beat the government. They have Apache helicopters and tanks. But at the same time, a bunch of blue-haired grandmas and Proud Boys almost overthrew the government on January 6th. The guy debated the other week. He said they had spears. Flags. That's what he meant. But they're sharp at the end. They found zip ties there. Ah, there we go. When the FBI was attacking leftist movements for decades, the right never said anything about them. I did. I heavily criticized the Patriot Act and the targeting of Muslims and the intentionally, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of, not blackmail. Geez, I'm drawing a blank here. Entrapping people, convincing them to concoct terrorist plans, and then oftentimes people, for example, I remember the one case I focused heavily on was, which is important to me because I work in the home healthcare field with people with autism and developmental disabilities. They went after this one young Muslim guy that was like mentally handicapped, incentivized him with all this bullshit propaganda. Yeah, the Destiny talk's supposed to happen any minute. He's talking to someone else. Trump didn't put a Muslim ban on Muslims. Anyways, I criticized that Patriot Act. Now the lefties that used to criticize that for me are for the total weaponization of the FBI. The Muslim ban wasn't a Muslim ban. It was a ban from countries that were on a list that Obama's team compiled of the countries most likely to export terrorism. Many of those countries happen to be Muslim majority, but the largest Muslim countries were not on that ban. But I get it. You watch CNN, you know the talking points. Hello, shout out to Maria. Please on her success. Great. All right, let's see what's going on here. All right, I gotta leave. IRI wants to talk to me for a minute, so I'm gonna leave here for a second. Let's see what he has to say. All right, I'm supposed to look at this. 1 second. Hey, what's up?
Yo, I heard some of your conversation with Destiny last night. Exciting stuff.
Thank you, thank you.
Do you see my stream? Do you see this screenshot I have up?
Yeah, that's it's lagged a little, but you got the Devin Archer transcript.
I just have this one section, and because I heard you were saying yesterday about the DC is Joe Biden, but Devin Archer said differently in the transcript.
No, he doesn't. He's talking about the DC team that specifically spun a story to him on a narrative. If you look at the transcript, right, it's clear that he says, it's his words, I'm not putting it in, they told me they called Joe Biden. And then he goes through and he repeatedly talks about how he was told they called Joe Biden. And the last question they asked was, did they tell you they called Joe Biden or D.C.? And he says D.C., D.C. Now think of this in context. You could, if you're in a working relationship with someone and they're your friend, like he was friends with Hunter Biden, you could have multiple different ways that you speak or names you have for people, but you would know the difference. For example, if my wife told me like, hey, call our buddies in Homestead, I know who she's talking about. But then if she says our team in Homestead, that could be something relating to my business that doesn't mean my friends that she would have been talking about in the first conversation. So it is clear based on the transcript that when he heard the term we called DC, that he knew that meant Joe Biden. Now you could say perhaps he was incorrect in that assessment, but it is absolutely clear that's what Devin Archer's saying happened.
Well, I read the whole transcript last night, 141 pages. I don't recall seeing that. I will go back and look again and see, but I'm pretty sure he did not know who they called, or he definitely said he didn't
Page
hear
34 of the
contents
transcript.
conversation.
Page 34.
Page 34?
Yep.
Okay, I'll take a look. But, I mean, this is later on. This is when Dan Goldman got his chance to ask questions. And so you could argue that he was clarifying here, and this was later in the conversation.
He's not for two reasons, right? And I'll tell you what. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking up the transcript and I took away your video so people could on my channel could see what you put up there. For two reasons, because what he's talking about here, what Goldman, and you know this if you read this, what he's talking about here is Goldman's got this line where he's like, "But you said that you were told that actually firing Shokin was bad." And he's like, "Yeah."
Right.
And he's like, "From who?" He says, "The DC team." And the DC team's like, Blue Star Strategies. And right. So the DC
I remember
team,
him hearing it from an executive at Burisma, because Shokin wasn't as aggressive as he could be, so they were working with him and they felt like they could deal with him. So
that's
he was
not,
favorable to them.
that is not, he specifically asked at one point, but you weren't told by the top execs at Burisma or Hunter Biden or any of them. And he says, no, it was the DC team that told him that. So when he says, do you understand the difference? Saying call the DC team, that's talking about their team. Call DC, that's not the same as saying call the DC team. And when they said, Hunter, we're under pressure, call DC, they didn't mean call Blue Star Strategy. They wouldn't need Hunter Biden to call Blue Star Strategy. When they're telling Hunter Biden call DC, they're saying call your dad, call your prominent officials in the United States. Don't call other employees we have. That would make no sense.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're saying that there's a difference in DC versus DC team. That's
saying,
just to clarify.
Right. What Goldman's talking
in
about.
Devin Archer's eyes.
Absolutely in Devin Archer's eyes. And it's clear that everyone involved in this transcript understands that as well, right? No one is accusing, like Goldman, I would guess, if I'm steel manning his position as someone who's defending Biden, he would probably say, look, we're not sure if call DC means Joe Biden, or it could mean some other officials in DC. That would be, though he hasn't said that, he hasn't made that defense, but that could be what Goldman would say. Goldman, I don't think, would try to make the argument that when you said call DC, what they really meant is the same as when you talk later about the DC team, which is Blue Star Strategy. Again, it would make no sense. Why would the head of Burisma, who could call whoever he wanted on his team, say, I'm under pressure, Hunter Biden, you call Blue Star Strategy? It would make no sense. When he's saying call DC, that's different than when when you have Archer here, he's talking about the people in DC that was the team of Burisma. Joe Biden go ahead.
I would just argue that the reason why Hunter was brought on, according to Devin Archer, was because of his contacts in DC. Not Joe Biden, but because of his contacts with these well-heeled law firms and such. You know, it's hard to get in the door with these places. And beyond corporate governance, he was also a matchmaker and put people together. And he hired these firms working with Burisma to help them out. And so that would be my argument for why Hunter Biden would call DC and not the head of Burisma. I'm sure he's got better things to do. And that was Hunter's job, it seems, on the board.
I just think it sounds absurd. You're at this dinner, you're sitting, or
why?
after dinner.
I'll
tell you what. I'll tell you why. Right? Because one, it is obvious that Devin Archer, he testifies that he thought that call when they said DC was to Joe Biden. That's what his belief is. Second, it would be absurd.
I'll have to go back and look at that.
Yeah, it's page 34.
Page 34.
Yeah. Okay. He says they said what it starts off something like this, and what happened after that? He said, "Look, I wasn't there for the call, but he called Joe Biden." That's literally what he says. Yeah.
I'll take a look.
Yeah. Check page 34.
So it's their page 34, right? So if
correct.
I go down to
34, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just want to see. If you have to leave anytime too, Rob.
Destiny's supposed to talk to me at some point, but then Loner Bucks jumped in, so I don't know. When he messages me, I'll head out, but right now it's not happening. So.
Okay. So he said, let's see here, government pressure. Okay.
Did he make?
When you say pressure. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Just keep scrolling down. So he says they asked him to make a call.
Is it before the Jim Jordan's question and the 23
No,
million
it'll be
pounds
after
at the
that.
bottom?
It'll be after this.
After that.
Yep.
That's 35.
Well, I was incorrect about the number. 34 is where they're talking
That's
about
okay,
Ukrainian
that's
government. Keep going down.
Okay.
It'll be after. I'm watching your screen, so it's after. Might be 36, the beginning of page 36.
Okay. Is it here? So why do you think they were asking Hunter Biden for DC help there?
That's part of that. He's talking. Keep going down. That's not specifically what we're talking about.
Okay.
Keep going down.
Talking about why he
Right
called,
there,
yeah.
Mr. Mandolfo. What did Hunter Biden do after he was given the request? Did you see it? At 36.
36?
Yep.
Okay, I'm on 36. I got Biggs, Archer, Mr. Mendolfo.
Right.
What did Hunter Biden do after he was given that request? Listen, I did not hear the phone call, but he called his dad.
Right.
How do you know that? Because I think Vadim told me, but again, it's unclear. Just know that there was a call that happened there, and I was not privy to it. Well, I mean, it sounds like it was unclear.
Right, but what he's saying is when they said we called DC, he knew that meant they called his dad. So he's not saying, oh, they called the team in DC Blue Star Strategies. Now, you could say that, well, how does he know? I would argue the reason he knows is because he's privy to how they talk about this stuff. And he mentioned in this transcript, and he mentioned in his interview with Tucker Carlson, that they sort of kept him out of the loop of that. No one was going around saying, like, we're calling Joe Biden. That's not how they talked. They keep this sort of level of plausible deniability. So he was well aware when they said, hey, call DC to deal with this pressure from Ukrainian government investigations, and then Hunter called DC that was a call to Joe Biden.
I could see how you're seeing that, but I am concerned that, he kind of backtracks within the next sentence a little bit on his conviction on it was to his dad.
No, I don't think he backtracks at all about that. He's just being honest, right? Like, so for example, if I said...
But he said it's unclear. Why did he say it's unclear?
Well, he's saying, leave it there. It says, we called DC, but, it's not like there was not like we've got our problem solved kind of, revelation. I wasn't on that side of the equation, right? He's just saying, look, they don't tell me that type of shit. That's what he's saying. He's like, he's not saying who was called was unclear. He was saying it's not this like... they told me that he said, go ahead.
Let's say we agree. Let's say I agree. Okay, he did call his dad, but I don't think there's anything here. I don't know. I'm not reading it, but I mean, maybe he called his dad just to call his dad, and we don't know what he talked about. It could have been about, hey, I shit the bed again, and I'm sorry, like
well, I hope
literally shit his bed in his hotel room or something.
I hope
we have
not.
no idea what
who's cleaning up those sheets. It doesn't matter, though, right? No one's... I'll tell you why it doesn't matter. Of course it would be...
Isn't that part of selling the illusion of access? Like, I'm going to go...
Yes, it could be.
I'm going to call my dad right now.
That could be.
My dad right now. And he calls, he's like, hey, Dad, what's up? What do you think about
that absolutely could be.
Last night?
But listen to me, right? I'm not saying, nor is Devin Archer, nor anyone that I know of that's credible, is saying that we know the details of what that call was. It could be. Mm-hmm. It could be that Hunter Biden called his dad. Here's what's important. It is clear, based on what Devin Archer is saying, Zlochevsky was implying that he wanted Hunter to call his dad. So maybe Hunter leaves the room and calls his dad and it's like, hey, what's up, Dad? Yeah, I'm at this sweet Four Seasons. You got to try the Mai Tais when you get here. They're fantastic. Anyway, tell everyone I love them. Goodbye. Then he goes back to Zlochevsky and goes, yeah, I called Dad. Right? That could be what happened. What we're doing, though, is outlining the circumstantial evidence that would suggest that Joe Biden, who then a few days later takes an action, which we're told he came up with on his own, which was using a quid pro quo for $1 billion tax dollars to guarantee a loan to force the firing of Shokin. The circumstantial evidence, then, the case is very simple that we could see that it would justify some sort of investigation in that we had Zlochevsky say, I'm under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations, which undercuts the argument that people have made for years that actually there weren't investigations into Burisma in Ukraine. Shokin shut them all down. Then why is this dude requesting Hunter Biden call his dad to deal with it? And then Hunter called his dad. We don't know what his dad said, but what we do know is 4 days later, his dad offers this quid pro quo, and the end result is Shokin gets fired, and it is a massive benefit to Burisma. Because once Shokin's fired, Zlotsenko comes in, and he promptly gives them a slap on the wrist, allowing Zlochevsky to come back to Ukraine, to have his assets unfrozen, and to go right back to business, where he continued to pay Hunter Biden for a couple years afterwards.
Well, I have two things I want to say. One, I'm not sure, and I'd have to look in the transcript, that the Burisma executive wanted Hunter to call his dad when he said to DC and that we have a lot of pressure. And I tell you that in sincerity because what were the problems that this executive were dealing with? One was he was unable to get a visa to America, right, and Mexico. And also he had 23 million pounds being held up in London, I believe.
Those were unfrozen.
And
I was unfrozen in 2014.
That was the pressure. That was what Devin Archer described.
Why would that? But wait a minute. Why would this case that was dealt with in 2014 be pressuring Zlochevsky in December of 2000? It was that. And I'll tell the story to you. Right. This is there was a prosecutor named Yarima. Hunter comes on in like May of 2014. Yarima, not Shokin, is the head prosecutor at this time in Ukraine. The UK freezes these assets of $23 million. Right. The judge then reaches out to Ukraine and is like, what evidence do you have of his guilt? Under Yarima's prosecutor office in 2014, they then tipped off Zlochevsky and they sent him a letter that was designed to then be used in the British court that basically said, oh, there's no accusation you've done any wrongdoing. This then forced the UK court in 2014 to unfreeze the assets. That's where you get like Ambassador Pyatt and State Department George Kent. All of them are talking in 2014 about how furious they are because the prosecutor's office in Ukraine tipped off Zlochevsky, which allowed these assets to be unfrozen. So that all resolved in 2014. There is no reason that 12 months later that would be the pressure that Zlochevsky is so concerned about that he's at the Four Seasons telling Hunter Biden to call DC to deal with it.
Well, based on the transcript, what I read last night, I got the impression that the pressure was the 23 million pounds. So I will look into the timeline based on what you just said and take a look for myself and see. But what do you think the pressure was then that they were feeling?
Shokin. The investigation. Well, for example, we could see that Shokin, there is evidence that he was proceeding with the investigation. I'll give you two scenarios, though, what could happen. One, it could be that Shokin was a legitimate prosecutor and that he was taking his time but looking into this stuff. For example, there's evidence that those previous prosecutors that tipped off, Shokin's office actually found and named those people and started an investigation into them. We know that assets in Ukraine were either frozen under Shokin or were frozen previous to him but continued to be frozen under Shokin, right? We know that once a court overruled and allowed those assets to go back to Zlochevsky temporarily, that Shokin in early February took the steps of refreezing those assets. And we could even see from Devin Archer's interview with Tucker Carlson, he specifically says when talking about this Ukrainian pressure, he mentioned Shokin and how upset Zlochevsky was that his assets had been frozen, which is why he had fled the country. So there's credible reasons to believe that Shokin actually was investigating. However, scenario 2 could be, and there's good reason to believe it could be a combination of these two scenarios. Maybe Shokin was corrupt and was soliciting a bribe from Zlochevsky. This would still infuriate Zlochevsky, right? And we know that there was, I know this is getting in the weeds, but you could look all this up if you want. You can go to my Twitter timeline and find this. There was an MP in Ukraine named Onyshenko. And Onyshenko recorded himself talking with President Poroshenko in December of 2015. And what he was doing was he was sent by Zlochevsky to offer President Poroshenko a bribe from Zlochevsky. And Poroshenko admits that he has taken previous bribes from Zlochevsky. What it appeared, according to Onyshenko, what was happening was basically Poroshenko was using his prosecutors to solicit bribes from Zlochevsky, small monthly bribes, like $1 million a month or something like that. Then we had reporters from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and other places start to sniff around. Wait a minute, there's corruption there. What's Hunter Biden doing working there? Zlochevsky's feeling the heat. He's tired of this shit, and so he basically goes and's like, dude, I'll offer you like a $50 million bribe. Deal with this. That's on record. We have the recording of him offering Poroshenko that bribe. So what's likely, and then Onyshchenko later goes on to say he doesn't have this recorded because it was in other conversations, but he goes on to say that he was told by Poroshenko that Poroshenko knew that Zlochevsky was also bribing the Bidens to get this investigation buried. But even if you don't believe Onyshchenko's word in that, we absolutely have his recording that shows that Poroshenko was taking a bribe. So it seems like what's likely is Zlochevsky and them felt pressured because they knew that there was this guy Shokin who either legitimately or at the behest of Poroshenko was investigating and holding that threat over them to say, eventually we'll prosecute you unless you continue to pay us money. And Zlochevsky thought one of the ways to deal with that would be that if Hunter Biden used his connections to his father, and then his father said, look, unless you get rid of this prosecutor that's harassing us, you're not going to get that $1 billion. If you Google New York Times Kenneth Vogel in 2019, there is an article where he expressly says in the article, I'll steelman your position here. Vogel says they see no evidence whatsoever that Biden did this for corrupt reasons. That's fine. We can have that debate later. But he also says in there that Burisma, insiders in Burisma, told Ken Vogel from the New York Times they were happy with Shokin going because Shokin was trying to get bribes from them and threatening them, and they were happy with Lutsenko as the replacement because they knew they'd be able to work with him to bury the case. And that's exactly what happened. That's not conspiracy theory Rob Noerr talking. That's Kenneth Vogel at the New York Times.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you what you thought the pressure was, so I can look into that stuff now that I've heard your case on it. I don't know how much time I have, and I got to get going here soon.
If you want real quick, I could give you the steel man of what like someone like Pisco would say the pressure is. If you like, I'll give you his position.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I have an idea, but I'm curious what your response is to this. I don't know if you still have my stream up, but I have another screenshot from the transcript where he talks about that it was not good to have the guy fired. This is one where he says the narrative was spun to me, quite frankly.
What's that mean to you? The narrative was spun. What do you think that means?
Well, I think it's just saying that this is the story they were telling me, and that's
right. That's exactly what
they
it was.
And
so think about this. Let's say you have this company, and you have an HR department, and you have you know how companies work. There's many departments, right? Devin Archer's there basically because they wanted to bring Hunter Biden in. But the job that he's tasked for after Hunter's there, he's an angel investor. He's trying to get investments for Zlochevsky. You don't want your investment side dealing with actual crimes if you're committing them on another side, right? So they're not, of course, the people that are aware that there's this illegal lobbying going on or there's bribes being paid, they're not going to go and say, oh, this is great for us. Hunter called his dad, now they're getting Shokin fired, and that's going to be great for us. Woo! They're not going to tell the board that. In fact, if Biden's team was working with them to fire this guy to help them, they probably would have made it a condition. You need to start telling everyone whatever they say. No, this is really bad for us. Because it's in everyone's best interest involved in this to have the plausible deniability that we thought it was bad. When Devin Archer's saying the narrative was spun, he's saying that basically the lobbyists in D.C. were then reaching out to all the board of directors going, oh, shucks, geez, Shokin's gone. Now we might get investigated. Well, one, we know that's not the case. Lutsenko came in and dropped it. Second, Ken Vogel says that the insiders were actually telling them they were happy with the firing of Shokin. And third, it wouldn't matter anyways if that's what they felt, that it would be bad because it's belied. Or I'm sorry, what I wanted to say was during the interview he had with Tucker Carlson, he actually laughs, right? Where Tucker's like, they spun that narrative to you, and he's like, yeah, looking back, that's stupid. Devin Archer actually laughs, and it's clear that his implication is, yeah, this was just the bullshit they were telling us to cover their ass.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I do think you have to admit that that is some assumption there, and you are twisting around a bit saying they're deceiving their own board members and maybe even purposefully doing so, and they're in on it too. I mean,
well, that might be true. Yeah, I am making
skeptical on that.
But we all are.
It is a bit of a leap that you're making there.
I think my leap that I'm making there, I will admit, like much of this, I don't have like 100% smoking gun. That's absolutely true. But you have to make a leap of yourself to interpret things in the way that you want. And my question to you is, given all this, I don't think that what I'm saying is implausible. Do you think that this is reason to justify an investigation into Biden?
Well, first, I would say that he could get in trouble for lying to Congress, even though he wasn't under oath, which I don't know why he wasn't put under oath when he did this testimony. But, I mean, his version to Congress is this narrative. And so we,
No, that's who? You're talking Devin
I don't
Archer?
think we should assume beyond that. Yeah, Devin Archer.
No. I don't think you understand how these things work. Devin Archer is trying to be careful when he says, like, oh, so they said call Joe Biden. He's like, no, they said call DC. But he's saying that meant Joe Biden to him, right? When they say, but wait a minute, Goldman says, weren't you spun this, or weren't you told that the firing of Shokin would be bad? He can't lie. He can't lie. He might think it was obvious bullshit, but he has to say, this is the narrative I was spun. He could have said, I was told that, but he chose those words carefully. The narrative I was spun. That's not then that he lied. If he was spun that narrative.
Spun. I don't see it saying spun. It just says that was a narrative.
It doesn't say the word spun in the transcript?
Let me look. Not on the current one I have. Let me see. Oh, no, you're right. It does say that was the narrative that was spun to me. I was looking at another time
it's all right.
he was asked about.
Not everyone follows this as much as me, so I mean, let's say, just hear me out for a second, all right? Let's say he really believes that was bullshit, right? Would it have not been lying under oath if he didn't tell them that narrative was spun?
Well, but I think saying a narrative was spun, you seem to be putting a sort of nefarious context on that. I don't see that necessarily as saying this is the tall tale they told me. Am I misinterpreting what you're saying? But you're implying that he was using those words to say, well, that's the story they told me, as if like hint, it's their version. I don't know. There could be another version.
That's
right.
That
what you're saying?
That's right. That is what I'm telling you. But what I'm further telling you is, why does it?
Unfair of me? Is that unfair of me to read it differently?
It is not unfair in the sense that other obvious people that have a bias to protect Biden are going to read it in rose-colored glasses. Let me be clear. I'm not singling you out. You don't think that I have a bias? Of course I do. Right? I'm not signaling you out as that. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying if you have a predilection to think that this is a witch hunt, I don't think Biden did anything wrong, you could absolutely read those words and say, oh, my question is twofold, or I have 1 point and then one question about it. The point is, we could see, despite the fact what he was told, that was factually incorrect. The firing of Shokin indisputably was beneficial to Burisma. It absolutely was. It's beyond dispute.
We don't know if they knew it was going to be, and it sounds like they thought it wouldn't be as beneficial based on what Devin Archer said as far as spinning a narrative, shall we say.
It doesn't sound that way. It doesn't.
Is that fair though?
No, you could interpret it that way. You could be willfully blind and say, despite I mean, think about it. So this is what we're led to believe. Under your scenario, you tell me this would be you tell me if I'm incorrect here. Ready? So that they say, call DC, call your dad, because we're under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations. But they know that the head prosecutor in Ukraine is actually on their side. So why would they say I'm under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations if the head prosecutor on their side is intentionally helping them?
Because I think that pressure isn't what you're describing. It could be other things, like
what?
Not able to get that visa to America.
How is that a Ukrainian government investigation that America won't give them a visa?
He didn't say it. He just said we're under pressure.
That is not what Devin Archer said. He said they were under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations. Look it up. It's on page 34.
Okay, but Ukrainian government investigations could be what's causing the visa to be denied in America, no?
No, that would be the United States investigation that would... If there's the entire argument that you have to make if Shokin's corrupt is there is no Ukrainian government investigation. The visa issue, which I'm not even sure of what the status of this was. I am aware that I do believe he was unable to get a visa to the United States, but I don't know when that was initiated or anything like that. But let's take your word for it that it was something fresh on his mind for some reason in December of 2015. Like, that wouldn't be a Ukrainian government investigation. Your entire argument is that the head prosecutor is literally in his pocket. So why wouldn't he say we're under pressure from the United States authorities who are denying our visa? Why would he not say that? Why would he instead say Ukrainian government investigation?
I don't know the words that were chosen, but my argument is that this Ukrainian prosecutor, Shokin, was the lesser of two evils at the time in his frame of mind. I can't be in his mind, but the way I read it was that this guy was better than what would come next as far as they knew. Maybe it turned out differently based on what you described, and the other guy came along and actually did give him a slap on the wrist, and it worked out favorably. But it seemed like, in his frame of mind at the time, Shokin was the better option.
Let me ask you
Now,
this.
as far as your...
Let me just real quick ask you this. Do you think that the scenario I outlined is plausible?
It is plausible, sure. I think it is. It could be what happened for sure. I don't deny you that.
And so
I
then
just think it takes
that's
a bit of a
all.
stretch to
That's
say
all.
that.
That's all I need. So then surely you're for an investigation.
Okay, and I was actually going to ask her that question. So these allegations, right, were made. I'm assuming you would agree. Comes from the FD 1023, right, with the Joe Biden
this
was
is completely
bribed $5 million.
Well, this is completely separate of that.
What started? No. But what would have started all this, right? This all started from that informant telling the FBI that Joe Biden was bribed to get this guy fired. Is that not the origin of?
I don't know. That's true, right? I think that even a bigger origin. I don't know that the 1023 is the origin of that, but the origin is basically the admission by Joe Biden. When this story really took legs was when Joe Biden's interview in the Council of Foreign Relations came out, where he said, I flew to Ukraine and I said, fire him. And they said, we're not going to give you this $1 billion and I'm leaving in 6 hours. And he said, you can't do that. Obama's in charge. And I said, call him. He'll say the same thing. And son of a bitch, they fired him. And then they replaced him with, at the time, who we thought was a good guy. That was sort of the start, at least of the sort of public perception and looking into this. Now, is it possible that Trump was looking at this 1023 from the FBI to kick all this off? I guess it's possible, but we weren't even aware of this 1023 until like 2 months ago.
Okay, so the 1023 was submitted in June of 2020.
Correct.
You agree?
Yes.
So
wait.
Bill Barr
I believe,
talked about
but remember, Trump's alleged quid pro quo that they impeached him over was 2019. So it's clear that this wasn't the start of it.
Okay, but my whole point is that in June 2020, the FBI receives this information about Joe Biden being bribed, and Bill Barr actually addressed this and said that he looked into it. He took it seriously. I believe he put the U.S. attorney in Pittsburgh on top of it to look into it. And so they had from June until January. Well, Bill Barr left in late December, but they had time to look into it. Bill Barr, he did not say they didn't find anything. Well, he didn't say they found nothing, but he said when what they looked into at the time they spent on it, that nothing came up. It doesn't exonerate Joe Biden, but he said that they did take it seriously and they had every reason to. And so I believe they did do an investigation, at least into this part, which encompasses a lot of the story.
So a couple
that's
things.
My argument that
okay.
they did do an
So
investigation.
you do support an investigation, and you would support increasing steps just to be sure, because it is plausible that this was something that was done to benefit his son, correct? So you support the impeachment inquiry.
No, I don't support the
Why?
impeachment inquiry, though it is good for us politically, so I don't mind it at all.
Well, but again, okay. Let me phrase it this way.
Because
right?
we can talk
there
about
should
the
have been.
impeachment
I've
inquiry.
talked to you about this before. I think you've heard me say this. There should have been an immediate investigation. The standard should be anytime a prominent politician in this country uses our tax dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor that's looking into their family member's company, that should automatically trigger an investigation. And anyone who does that, Joe Biden should expect that, because he should say, look, I understand the appearance of this is really bad, and so I want to assure the American people that there's nothing to see here, so we're going to be fully cooperative, because I swear I didn't do anything untoward, but it looks really bad. And you would especially want that if you're Joe Biden, because it turns out that that prosecutor that you fired was replaced with a guy that promptly did exactly what Burisma wanted. Exactly. So you'd really be kicking yourself going, shit, I accidentally helped the very company that my son's on the board of directors for. So you would be cheering for that.
Okay.
Secondly,
No.
Oh, go ahead.
Well,
you could respond.
Well, I just want to say that I see things differently. I don't think you're surprised to hear me say that. But obviously, I take the narrative of he did this openly. It was U.S. policy. But I don't want to get into discussion that. But overall, I don't have a problem with the FBI conducting investigations, Rob. It goes back to what we talked about on the panel the other day. where you don't have proof that they didn't do investigation into certain things. So how do you know they didn't look into this stuff? Because they didn't make an announcement, because they didn't talk about it. But
how would the FBI
both know?
So there's allegations that Joe Biden got money. So one of the steps they would take would be looking into Joe Biden's bank accounts, correct?
But that allegation came up in June 2020, right?
Okay, let's say that. Then post June 2020, surely it would have been advisable for the FBI. It would have been negligent for them not to look into Joe Biden's bank records at that point. When a trusted confidential human source told them that this corrupt Ukrainian oligarch said, I paid Joe Biden $5 million to fire Viktor Shokin. At that point, they should be looking into his bank accounts, correct?
Well, I can't speak to what their investigative method should be, but I think that they had a legitimate reason to look into it, and Bill Barr said they did.
Okay, so how would the FBI go about getting a warrant to look into someone's bank account? What's the process look like?
I don't know the details.
They have to get a warrant from a grand jury, correct?
I don't know the details.
That's what Pisco told me last night, and that's my understanding of it as well. Grand juries are under no obligation to remain secretive. Sure. The idea that there was a subpoena into the bank accounts of Joe Biden, or that there was an FBI investigation where they interviewed Joe Biden, and literally not one member of Congress, not one person in the press, no one has any evidence, any allegation whatsoever that sort of thing happened. It defies belief to think that could have happened and it hasn't been leaked.
Why?
It's absurd because it just a grand jury. So you're telling me that
about the privacy people want, they don't want to expose themselves to a national story.
Let me ask you this:
they're just random citizens.
Does the House Oversight Committee have the right to know that there was a grand jury that subpoenaed Biden's records? Would they be aware of that?
I don't think they'd be aware of that.
Of course they would. Of course they'd be aware of it.
Why would the Oversight Committee automatically be aware of a grand jury investigating something?
They would be aware because they're looking into Biden and they're getting records. They're getting all sorts of records from the IRS, for example. So they asked the IRS and all these agencies for records. They got records from the IRS that specifically outline all of these shell companies and things like that. So it's just a terrible argument, Ira. I don't know what to say. And Destiny makes the same argument. The argument is just, for all we know, the FBI has been investigating Joe Biden for 60 years of his life, and they go through his bank records every day. I guess if that's what you want to rely on. I'll take the words of the IRS whistleblowers that said that when they were looking into the tax cases of Hunter Biden and realized all these shell companies and money going to the family, they were stymied by the DOJ. They were not allowed to ask about Joe Biden. They were not allowed to talk to certain family members, and they were not allowed to get access to bank accounts that could be connected to people like Joe Biden. I'll take their word for it.
I respect that's their version. What do you say about the lead FBI agent on the case who came forward and rebutted their claims about that?
I don't believe he rebutted those claims. Here's what he did. His name's Sobensky or something to that effect. Am I correct?
Yep.
What he said was, Shapley claims that he heard Weiss say in their meeting, I forget the date of the meeting, but Weiss said, I don't
October
have...
7th.
What was the date?
October 7th.
That could be right. I'll take your word for that. Sounds right. So he heard Weiss say, I don't have ultimate charging authority. And Shapley reported that, right? Or Ziegler or Shapley, one of the two, reported that. And this other guy, Sobensky or whatever his name is, says, well, Shapley didn't have contemporaneous notes that said that. And I didn't recall that conversation happening. Bring it up.
Well, Shapley did have notes.
That's right. Because then the day after, did you read from the Washington Examiner and from the Oversight Committee that Shapley then came out the day after and said, no, unlike Sobensky or whatever his name is, I actually am now releasing my handwritten contemporaneous notes that shows that we were told that Weiss said he didn't have ultimate classification authority. And Sobensky didn't take any handwritten notes at the time or any contemporaneous notes. I'm also unaware of Sobensky disputing their claims that they were told that they weren't allowed to bring up Joe Biden. They were told they weren't allowed to have access or ask about things on the WhatsApp that said 50% of his money, Hunter Biden's money, was going to his dad, or the 10% going to the big guy. They weren't allowed to investigate any of that. They were tipped up. People at the DOJ or somewhere tipped off the Bidens that they were going to come to their house. They were told they couldn't get a subpoena for Joe Biden's house, even though they wanted one and had probable cause because it would be bad for optics. Can you show me anywhere where this lead FBI agent disputes that?
my reading of the FBI agent's testimony, and I haven't seen the transcript, but he said he refuted their claims that Weiss was prevented from charging anywhere, that he was prevented from special counsel status. I believe he talked about they also made a charge that they weren't allowed to investigate certain things and that the time ran out on the statute of limitations. So if we have this guy who is under oath to testifying, rebutting a couple of their claims, may not be as specific as you're referencing. I don't think it was. I have to see the transcript when it comes out if it's not. But he's rebutted 2 of their claims. Now, on top of that, David Weiss, the U.S. attorney who supposedly said this stuff at the meeting, has also written 3 letters. Now, that's not under oath, but he has written 3 letters, 2 to Jim Jordan, 1 to Lindsey Graham, saying the same thing the FBI agent said, that I had full authority. I could do whatever I wanted.
Hey, I think I got it.
Garland has also said this, and Joe Biden has
I
said
think
this.
I got to go in like 3 minutes. I swear I'll give you the last word. But I do think I have to go because I can't be here all night, and I'm supposed to talk to Destiny. And he, I don't know, messing me around here.
It's all good.
But I'll just say this real quick. Again, none of that's specific to the allegations of they weren't allowed to look into Joe Biden or his bank records and things like that. And I don't know what to say other than if this is true, if this version, we have a guy who's backed up by other guys that say we were told, he said he didn't have ultimate charge authority, who has contemporaneous notes. The other side has none of that, right? But if it's true, if you're right,
is
that those
fair though?
Yes, that is fair. We would
though,
trust
like, contemporaneous notes mean more. What if the guy has a photographic memory? And he said he never took notes. Like, what if he has a photographic memory and remembers everything like it was yesterday?
Well, then I guess if he's wrong, then he should be charged with a crime, right? Because he won't
But
be able to
also,
say.
who are the
Just be quick. Just be
who are
quick.
the
If he later
whistleblowers
comes out and
backed
says,
up?
"Oh, I didn't remember. I guess maybe it could have happened," you would then acknowledge that he should be charged with a crime because he lied. Correct?
Sure.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah, if
we'll
he
see.
lied,
We'll see
of
if that
course.
comes. But I'll just say this: at the end of the day, it's all what we can do is look at the facts that we do know. If we have a he said, she said. If Weiss was able to bring these charges, why didn't he until he was named special counsel?
Well, no, that's a great question. Well, I don't think he's being prevented from bringing the charges because today he brought charges, the felony gun charge, and it sounds like he's going to bring the tax charges, the misdemeanor tax charges, anyways. But
All right, I gotta go. I think Destiny's waiting for me now, and but I will happily talk to you. I'm not running from it. I'll talk to you anytime about this. So,
all right,
Have
man.
fun. Take it easy.
Talk
Yep.
to you later.
Yep. All right. Shit. All right. I'm in high demand, huh? Let's go. I got to be done by 4:30, so now I got to be strategic in what I talk about here. But no, just to comment on what IRI is saying there, it's nonsense. Like, none of that's... He's just talking about disputing whether or not Weiss had ultimate charging authority. The story doesn't make sense anyways, but it wouldn't dispute the other things that they said, that they weren't allowed to look into Joe Biden's records and that they said it would be bad for optics and all of that stuff. Oh, shit. Oh, okay. I didn't know I could just join the room, so.
Oh, well, what's up? How you doing?
Doing good. Did we sort out the Israeli-Palestine conflict? All sorted
Yeah,
out?
we figured out the whole shebang, the whole
Finally.
solution.
See, a Twitch streamer would never be able to do that. It'd have to be Kick or YouTube to get that done.
Exactly.
That's high
Thank
profile
God.
shit. So yeah, I got...
Wait, when you what is today? Is today Friday?
Thursday, I believe, yeah.
What are your normal working hours?
So normally I go into work Sunday night at 10 p.m. and I do what's called block shift. So I have to stay there 24/7 until I leave, usually Wednesday at 2 p.m. But then normally Thursdays or Fridays I have to drive to my corporate office and I'm usually there for 4 or 5 hours. So I'm allowed to clock out when I'm there, but I have to be there in case there's emergencies or stuff. So that's...
And you said you normally work with like mentally disadvantaged children?
Not children, adults. So people with autism, other disabilities and things like that. Yeah. Yep.
What exactly is your job? What do you do? You don't have to say more.
No,
than
no, I don't mind. So basically, the idea is, you heard like that there was these places in my state. It would be like Polk. You had these big psychiatric centers where people would
Yeah.
be in there, right? So they're trying to transition people out of those centers and put them more in a home health environment. So
You're talking about like people that would go from essentially being institutionalized to having like kind of just an assisted independent living
correct.
kind of?
So
Okay, gotcha.
the house is the company owns the house, but it's the client's house. And we're there to help them achieve goals that they have outlined in like an ISP. So depending on the level that the client needs care of, you might do things like you have to administer medication and you have to get to doctor appointments and you have to, help them achieve their goals. If one of their goals, like they want to become a firefighter, which I've had that happen, where I would go to volunteer firefighting things with them and I would cook them meals and clean their house and that sort of stuff. So I don't have a degree in the sense that I'm a nurse where I could like prescribe medications or anything. I could only follow the orders that the doctors give and give out those medications and stuff like that every day. But yeah, that's general.
Gotcha. So if I had like can you have mid-functioning autism or is it only,
Yes.
is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Autism.
So if I had somebody that was like, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a spectrum. Like you probably have autism. I probably do too, to some level. The way
Sure.
that it's.
But I've known there's a girl I knew who had 2 low functioning autistic brothers, and they're like they had like it was so bad they had to have like adult men in the house to manage them because they were
yes, and normally
very, 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 very difficult to
right.
yeah.
Most of the people in the companies I've worked for, so I've been with the company I'm at now for over 10 years. Most of the people aren't that severe, though there are some. Most of it. So like I've worked with people that you wouldn't even know would have home health care that had 9 to 5 jobs. And so part of your job was helping them maintain their house and helping them get to work, driving them to work and picking them up and stuff like that. But yeah, it runs the gambit. I've been with one client now for over 10 years. It's a weird feeling because it basically becomes part of your family. Like I left the company to sell life insurance there a year and a half or 2.5 years ago, right before COVID hit. So that was a great choice. Didn't end up working out so well. So I went back to the company. But yeah, it's basically people become part of your family if you work with the same person over and over. But
Yeah, it feels difficult, or it's unfortunate that like it feels like that transitory stage is super needed for especially like homeless populations. Like they don't need to be in a house 24/7, like a full supervision, like an institution. But if they just had like a little bit of help for maybe hygiene or home care or transportation, like they can do almost everything else on their own. They just need like that one thing.
yeah,
Something
and-
that Or go ahead.
Yeah, it's really sad, I think, with adult population, because I think we now have a better understanding with younger people. So if you have a kid that has autism now, we at least have some sort of idea when they're in school and stuff. One of the saddest things for me is, just 2 little examples. You'll deal with like adult men in their like 40s or 50s that don't know like what's proper sexuality. So like I remember one time I was watching the movie From Dusk Till Dawn with one of my clients, and there's this scene where Selma Hayek's like basically a stripper and she's got this snake on her. She looks pretty hot, and like this guy that I'm working with gets ashamed and is like, I have to leave the room, I'm not allowed to look at her. He's like a 40-year-old man, because no one ever had a conversation with him when he was young because he was different and they didn't know how to deal with it. And so there's a lot of it, just people that are functioning enough that they could get around in society. If they just had people there to help them through some of the awkward stuff, like you said, hygiene and stuff. And a lot of them are super institutionalized. Like it feels like that scene in Shawshank Redemption where, you'll work with people that'll ask you permission to use the bathroom in their own house. It's like, dude, it's your house. You use the bathroom. Or can I change the channel? Yeah, it's your TV. You can do what you want. So yeah, it's a lot of that. It's sad, but I'm happy to do it. It's the first job I've ever had where I actually thought I was doing something important, because I've actually seen people that were written off as violent and they couldn't be members of society. And then once they have consistent staff, all of a sudden they got friends all through town. They're, they're working jobs and stuff. So I enjoy it.
Yeah, that's cool. At the casino that I worked, I don't know if this is standard for a lot of companies, but there was like they hired back of house workers. I think they must have been part of a program, but they hired a lot of back of house workers that you could tell were I don't know if you'd say mentally disabled, special needs or whatever, but sometimes there would be people that would help them come to work and everything. But like aside from like a couple of off things, more or less they could live like fully independent lives. Like they were happy, they had friends, they could joke around. But yeah, they just need like that. Like they don't need to be fully institutionalized. They can't quite get along on their own, and it's hard to bridge that gap sometimes for people, or to make people understand that gap even needs to be bridged. Yeah,
it really helps put your life into perspective too, of like the things that you find important. I would say, honest to goodness, 95% of the people I've worked with, the things that they want most in life are like a job, a friend, a girlfriend. And when you look at that, it's like, I've complained about things in my life, and it's like, geez, you look at that and you're like, all these people wants to fit in, to be someone. They want to be treated like everyone else in society. So it's a difficult. There's no right answer. I'm not sitting here to be like, there shouldn't be anyone in any facility. They should all be in homes like this. Obviously, people should be given freedom up until the point where they harm other people, and a lot of times that's something you deal with, aggression towards members of the community and stuff. And I choose to work at a company that's no restraint because I don't want to restrain anyone, but there are companies where you're allowed to apply restraints to people because unfortunately there can be violence, to members of the community, but not the people I work with. I haven't had any of that in years. So
Gotcha.
But now people are picking on me because I came on here and not yelling at you or something here. So I'm like,
no, it's all good. Taking care of people and like figuring out where people fit into society is it's frustrating. It's one of the not to make it political, but that's one of the things where like I genuinely feel like most people that I've talked to and dealt with, criminal people, drug dealer people, mentally disabled people, whatever. I feel like most people really want the opportunity to be able to just work, take care of themselves, have some friends and family, and do what they can. So I get upset sometimes with the characterization of homeless people, mentally disabled people, minorities, or whatever. It's like I feel like if most people had the opportunity to work and provide themselves, they would choose that. I think people like that. There's like an honor, integrity, and a sense of independence that comes from that generally. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously there are caveats, right? Like addiction and stuff like that could really screw that over, right? And it's difficult because a lot of people in this field are super progressive left wing to the point where it's like, well, there should be no restrictions on people whatsoever. But sometimes it's overstimulating to put someone with like I had a person with severe autism that weighed 400 and something pounds, was the strongest human being I've ever seen. They put me in the hospital 5-6 times. They would, my boss would be like, take them to Dairy Queen. Okay. And then they smash the windows out at Dairy Queen. And it's like, it's difficult. I also believe I have a soft spot in my heart for people with that sort of, afflictions. But at some point you have to say like, but we can't do this. We can't just say, well, there's no consequences. You could smash up people in town and it's okay because you have a diagnosis. So it's a fine line. It really is. But I obviously lean towards that line being giving people as much freedom and independence as possible. So.
Sure.
All right. On the Burisma stuff, like, so I got until like 4:30, so I got like 40 minutes. So I thought,
shit, I'm so sorry. Okay,
it's
my bad.
no problem.
If I'd have known you had a limited time, I would have kicked these other fuckers out earlier.
It's no
I'll be
problem.
streaming until probably around 9 tonight too. So if you come back, or tomorrow too, we can do this for as long as you want. So.
All right, no problem. So one of the things I wanted to say, so I think that what I've heard is you're preparing for a debate, or you're just trying to find out facts. So what I'm going to do is I will send you a bunch of links through. I think the best reporter on this from my side has been John Solomon. And he's got a couple links that I think are timelines that outline this stuff. And a lot of those articles that he has direct links to the source material. So you could check that out. And the other thing I'll say is no one listening here should just take my word for it. And I don't know what your audience thinks about this sniveling shit person that I'm about to bring up, but I think that you should listen to Pisco give the other side of it. And I'm just kidding. I like Pisco, calling him a sniveling shit. But because he obviously is looking at this and is coming to different conclusions than me. But I talked to him last night after I talked to you. I think most of what I told you last night, he agrees with factually what happened. He would disagree with my interpretation of what that means then. So I just want people to know it's not that I'm sitting here saying, nope, this is definitive. My stance on this has always been, the first time I ever talked to you was about the Trump impeachment in 2019. And my stance when I talked to you, my argument that I've been making the whole time is anytime that we have a high-level politician that uses U.S. tax dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor that's looking into a family person's company, there should be an immediate and independent investigation. And I thought that investigation had not occurred. And even if Trump was ham-fisted about it, Trump was making an attempt to see an investigation into that because he had watched the FBI be, in his mind, corrupt against him and was like, they let Joe Biden get away with this shit. So now that there's a new president in Ukraine, I want to talk to him about dealing. That was the conversation that I was prepared to have with you. It's, if I remember, your take on it was the impeachment was necessary because he withheld congressional approved aid, which...
Yeah, I'm not even, so just to be clear, okay, without giving a whole backstory on my life, all I'm doing right now is I've tried to wipe my mind of everything that I know of this, and I'm just getting your perspective, and I'm saying, and within your worldview, with the facts that you've asserted, without trying to even find contradictory facts, I'm just trying to see if the story that you're presenting with the facts that you're presenting is all sequitur, is all leads logically to the conclusion.
Okay.
That's all I'm trying to figure out.
All right.
Right. And then also to determine like the strength of your claim. So something I said before we talked today on my stream is that like if your final assessment of all of this is like, listen, I think some of this is kind of like sussy baka, and I think it's worth triggering some sort of investigation over this. Honestly, if like that's your opinion at the end of all this, I'm probably okay with that. I don't think I'm like super opposed to that. But generally, the strength of the claim here for people like Tim Pool is usually it's much stronger. I know for a fact criminal behavior happened here. It's like a foregone conclusion that something improper. The big man is obviously Joe Biden. He was obviously getting paid millions of dollars, and it's all like foregone basically. That's basically all I'm trying to check. Yeah.
Now, I would say a little more that I think that I would like to see an investigation in the FBI, why they didn't investigate, but that's a conversation for another day. I have been careful to say, I don't think that the evidence that I've seen now would be guilty beyond reasonable doubt. I think that people should have their fair day in trial. I do think that the evidence suggests, in the preponderance of evidence to me, suggests some sort of guilt, but that's different than saying beyond a reasonable doubt, at least in my mind.
No, that's fine. Okay,
so
sure.
That's the stance I'm coming. So we outlined the case yesterday, so let me just briefly outline why I think this suggests.
Well, wait,
Okay.
real quick. Okay, because I'm just I'm in the fact finder mode.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out. So I'm just asking questions about like a lot of the peripheral stuff. So here's what I would like to talk about for a little bit if we can.
Okay.
Do you know much about Burisma?
A little bit, like what's publicly available and it's basically agreed upon. Yeah.
So Burisma is essentially it's a holding company that controls like energy companies in Ukraine, essentially, right?
Correct. Yeah, and it was the allegations. So you mentioned this yesterday. What were the allegations of criminality?
So basically, what I'd like to know is what were the accusations initially against Burisma and the companies they controlled? What were people initially accusing of doing wrong and when?
Zolchevsky, that's the owner of Burisma, is what the accusations were against. And the accusation was when he was Minister of Ecology under the previous Ukrainian President Yanukovych, that he was giving out state-sanctioned natural gas leases or mineral leases specifically to his own company, right? And so the way this would work would there's funds.
Wait. I'm sorry, to his own company.
Yes.
Can you walk me through that? So Zolchevsky, was he part of the government?
Yes, he was Minister of Ecology. So part of his.
Okay, so he was Minister of Ecology. Did he work for Burisma at that point or no?
I believe he owned Burisma at that point, but I can't be 100% confident. But he was.
Okay, can we look that up real quick?
Yes,
Because I feel like that's pretty important. Yeah, because if he owned it and was Minister of Ecology at the same time, that's like pretty. That seems pretty silly. But
let's see if I can find this. He definitely owned natural. I think it was Burisma, natural gas companies created Burisma. Let's see if I can look this up.
And then what year were these accusations about? We can look all this up. I don't expect you to have all of this memorized too. Right.
Yeah, I believe the accusations were from like the tenure of like 2012, 13, around that time.
Okay.
So
I'm going to read, I'm just reading 2 paragraphs on the wiki here. Also, if you think this isn't relevant, you tell me to shut the fuck up. Okay. Investigations. In April of 2014, the Serious Fraud Office of the United Kingdom launched a money laundering investigation against Zlochevsky. And as a result, accounts of Burisma Holdings and its parent Brokidi Investments at the London branch of BNP Paribas containing $23 million USD were frozen. That money was transferred as a result of complex transactions by a company controlled by Ukrainian businessman Serhiy Kurchenko, a subject of the European Union restrictive measures. When the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office failed to provide documents needed for the investigation, a British court in January 2015 dropped the case and ordered to unfreeze the assets. In September of 2015, then U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Jeffrey Piat gave a speech in which he called out Ukrainian prosecutors for failing to cooperate with the investigation. Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine and National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine have conducted in total 15 investigations on Burisma's owner, Zlochevsky. In 2016, former General Prosecutor Yuri Lutsenko accused Burisma's subsidiaries of conspiracy and tax evasion of about $1 billion, $70 million for tax evasion in 2014 to 2015, but later during investigation, subsidiaries of Burisma were not mentioned. Tax audit of Esko Pivnich by the State Fiscal Service found some violations in 2016. As a result, USD $1.9 million of additional taxes were paid to eliminate criminal charges. In total, Burisma paid $7.44 million USD of taxes to avoid further criminal proceedings. A criminal investigation was conducted if natural resource extraction licenses were issued to Burisma subsidiaries legally during the period Zlochevsky held government office. Although violations of the procedure were established by NABU, the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office missed procedural deadlines for a lawsuit, and the case for nullifying licenses was dismissed by the court. In October of 2019, Prosecutor General Ruslan Ryaboshabka announced that all 15 investigation cases will be reviewed. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't dispute any of that. That's basically what I found. So I just looking briefly at another source while you were reading that, he was also accused of like tax evasion in Ukraine, money laundering and things like that. But the central claim that people bring up that they were really pissed off that he was never held accountable for was this selling of these gas leases corruptly and things like that. So yeah, and that outlines the case quite succinctly.
Can you link me something relating to that? Just so I can see like the accusations, how people felt about that, what the here. This is just so you know. Okay, so I'm telling you this is going on in the back of my head. Okay. When I'm asking you questions about Burisma, here's what I'm trying to figure out in my head. Okay, what I'm trying to figure out was there a legitimate investigation that yielded some sort of conviction or some sort of concession from the company that was then legitimately closed, or was there a criminal investigation that mysteriously evaporated, maybe because of external pressure by, say, the Bidens, because of Hunter Biden? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, what was the investigation legitimate? Did it have a legitimate end? Did it get closed legitimately? Or does it seem like something strange happened? That's basically what I'm kind of like.
So I'll have to look. It's going to be difficult because it's not going to be something that's easy to keyword search.
Sure,
but
I understand.
So like, here's a person that would be important to this conversation. There is an organization called the Anti-Corruption Action Center, and the head of it is a woman by the name of Daryl Kalyanuk, I think is her name. And so I've read a lot of what she said. She talks about the obvious criminality that occurred here. Another person worth talking about is a guy by the name of David Sakralivides, or something like that. David was basically the person that the United States really liked, the Obama-Biden administration. He was a deputy under Shokin, who was supposed to, him and this guy Casco were supposed to lead the special anti-corruption unit. And Sakralivides is one of the people that are cited. He's out there all the time saying Shokin's corrupt, Shokin's corrupt, Shokin's corrupt. So you see the West citing him a lot as a credible person who says that Viktor Shokin was corrupt. And both the anti-corruption people in Ukraine and him are like beyond a shadow of a doubt, Zlochevsky's guilty. He committed these crimes, and basically they buried these crimes by saying, oh, we missed deadlines, or, oh, we changed the schedule of the crime into now it's just, oh, they didn't pay taxes, so they owed all this money in taxes, like I think you said $70 million, and they ended up giving them like a less than $5 million. So it is pretty much...
This is something that I understand there's people saying it, but especially since we're doing this like original reading, and I think you would be upset if I were to say like, oh, the Durham report said nothing because this guy on CNN said it, right? It'd be cool to see like, and I can do this research on my own, or we can do it together tomorrow, or whatever. It'd be cool to see what is the timeline on the Burisma accusations, what did the investigations yield, and then what were the convictions or charges or restitution paid at the end to find out if that was like legitimate. Because just as two scenarios, like you would say to me, Stephen, they were facing all of these charges, all of these horrible things, and in 2014, they all kind of mysteriously evaporated. Isn't that kind of weird? And I would have to concede, I have to go, yeah, and that lines up with Hunter making the phone call in Dubai to his dad around 2015 in December, I think, right? That would be kind of strange. But then I think on your end, you would have to concede to me that like, okay, they did the investigation, they found some wrongdoing. It's pretty standard in Ukraine that like there are penalties that you pay, and then after that, he should be in the clear. And if that all got handled decently, then you'd have to say, okay, well, at the very least, it hurts my theory because the Burisma stuff seems like it was handled by about as by the books as it should have been, right?
That is reasonable, right? Okay, it is certainly, it is not dispositive of any sort of corruption of Biden.
Correct. It doesn't prove either of our points, but it leans us in directions.
It would be further defense of Biden if Lutsenko comes in and then has a legitimate investigation with legitimate penalties. And if that legitimate investigation was just basically paying a $4 million fine, then we would say, yeah, okay, well, that seems to speak that, you know, however, the opposite would also be true, as I think you've admitted. So, and that also wouldn't prove Biden's
guilt. And if I
guilt,
say, I'll even be so good faith here, that in the Wikipedia article we read, it said that Burisma was accused of conspiracy and tax evasion of about $1 billion in 2014 to 2015, which was the Biden period. But after that, Burisma wasn't mentioned, which is interesting. And then it said that they basically had to drop these cases because procedural deadlines for a lawsuit, and the case for nullifying license was dismissed because they just missed. It sounds like filing deadlines, which is also interesting. So yeah, there might be something here. But okay.
And I'll say it's difficult to find the exact, like, I know I've read this. I know I've read them talking about the details. I'll do my best to get that to you eventually. But what I will say is there are certain. The way I'm looking, I think you're absolutely right to get as many specifics as possible. But the way I look at it is this. There are multiple sides to an argument. There are people saying, well, Shokin was corrupt, and people that saying that he wasn't, and things like that. When everyone agrees, like when the IMF, the UK, the Obama, everyone in the Obama-Biden State Department agrees. When the anti-corruption activists, basically everyone in the world except Zlochevsky and Burisma agrees, yeah, these guys were guilty of serious crimes and got a slap on the wrist. That to me is good enough evidence to at least have the supposition that, okay, this looks like something bad.
And I agree that's true, but then the question is did the whole world agree that Zlochevsky and Burisma did something wrong, or did the whole world agree that there was general corruption in Ukraine that needed to be investigated further? That's like the question.
That's fair.
Like, I'm curious. Is like Obama and Biden, are they on record saying Zlochevsky and Burisma holdings are up to no good and something needs to happen here? Or is it always like general accusations of corruption in Ukraine?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I don't know that Biden or Obama ever specifically mentions the word Burisma. In fact, Biden's team's running from it once the press starts asking about his son being on the board. But when we see is like people like George Kent at the State Department or Ambassador Pyatt, they're specifically mentioning that 2014 case where the UK assets had to get unfrozen. They're specifically mentioning that as an act of corruption because they felt that Burisma was guilty and Zlochevsky was guilty, but because of corrupt prosecutors sending this letter that they were left off the hook. So they specifically mentioned...
Okay, so just to be clear, it sounds like, I don't know if they felt they were guilty, and it's just a Wikipedia article, so I'm sure there's more details. But it sounds like they didn't say they were guilty. It sounds like what happened was they launched an investigation, and as a part of that investigation, the General Prosecuting Office of Ukraine wasn't cooperating in a timely manner, and that investigation had to be closed, which meant that the funds were no longer frozen. That's what it sounds like happened.
Well, I mean, they've spoken to his guilt. In fact, one of the things that happens later is, oh shit, I'm going to screw up the date of this. USAID, which is like the official, you know what that is, the aid organization of the official United States government. It sends a memo out to a bunch of like aid, people in government, I think in 2017, right? And it's like, oh, we're doing these things in Ukraine, like these benefits in Ukraine, and one of our partners is Burisma. And George Kent from the State Department's like, wait, what? That's a terrible idea. They're so corrupt. Why would you? No, you can't do this. And USAID's like, oh, our bad. And they pull out of that because they realize, now you could say.
Sure, but then if you say that, and I hate to do this, I'm trying not to pull in external comments, but just so you went over that, yeah. So Pisco says, for instance, George Kent and others in the State Department, so this seems to affirm what you're saying, thought that by getting rid of Shokin, it would make prosecution of Zlochevsky more likely. So then it sounds like then that getting rid of Shokin here wasn't a way to cover for Zlochevsky. They thought that by getting rid of him, he'd be even more prosecuted. So then rather than it being evidence of some corrupt act to get rid of him, it just kind of like didn't turn out how they thought it would. Similar to like the 64 Hart-Celler Immigration Act, where we thought that when we did that, it wouldn't mean that like a whole bunch of Mexicans would immigrate to the United States, but that's exactly what happened, right?
But that's a different issue, right? I would grant you that, and we could talk about that, but that clearly that implies that they thought Burisma was guilty. And so one of the things I was going to say is, and we kind of already got to it, but just to say it succinctly, like, it is indisputable that the actions that Biden took, firing Shokin, benefited Burisma. It did.
True, but I think that the again, I'm going back to the Hart-Celler because I argue this so much with Nick. One of the and I'm not trying to throw you lot in with him. I don't think you're a Nazi or anything like that. I've never got that impression. Yeah. Okay, not yet. I don't even know if you're far right. I'm not sure if I have that impression of you or race or anything. I just want to say that for my fan base and for your that Nick oftentimes would make the argument that there was a secret, basically kind of like a plot to get the Hart-Celler, the 64 Hart-Celler immigration reform done because they wanted to bring in a whole bunch of brown people, basically, some Jewish shit or whatever, right? But that when you go back and you look at the time, the majority of Americans supported it because some of the clauses in there about like bringing in family members and stuff, people thought that we have a whole bunch of white European stock here. If we make these special provisions under this Immigration Act, we're probably just going to get more Italians and all these other people immigrating. But what ended up happening was that Immigration Act unlocked a whole bunch more brown immigration to the United States. So if somebody wanted to go back and look at it and go, well, look, they tried to get brown people here, I would say, well, no, I think that was an unintended consequence of what happened. And that's really important when we're talking about the motivations of passing the act. So if it was the case that you're saying that getting rid of Shokin actually benefited Burisma in a huge way, I don't think that's as important as looking at, was it the intention to benefit Burisma?
That's fair.
That's what I'm
and we'd already said this, right? They had let's just be clear. If the new guy, Litsenko, comes in and he brings the hammer down on Burisma, again, we said that's not evident, or that's not dispositive that Biden could have done anything corrupt, but it's certainly evidence to suggest against it. Because look, they got rid of that guy, and then all of a sudden the new guy comes in and he brings the hammer down on Burisma. And why would Biden do that? That's the company his son worked at. Why would, right? That would be evidence. Conversely, it would also be evidence to suggest that maybe something untoward happened if it ends up benefiting his son's company. But you're right, it doesn't specifically speak to the intention. So it's circumstantial evidence, but it's not proof positive. So then we look at.
But here's something where I would say this could benefit you, it could benefit me. Let's say, and I'm giving you an impossible standard of evidence. I know that this doesn't exist, and I don't expect you to ever produce evidence like this, right? To give you some credit, whenever I say this is circumstantial, a lot of the evidence around this will, because it's going to be unlikely that we're going to get an email from like Donald Trump saying I colluded with Russia, or an email from Joe Biden saying like I'm helping my son Hunter Biden by being a corrupt politician, right? I understand that direct testimony from the accused themselves won't ever exist, right? But like, let's say for instance, let's say Biden and Kent, it was leaked. There was a big email chain that leaked, and they were like, there are serious issues with the prosecution of Burisma right now. These investigations are not moving in the manner that they need to. And if Ukraine wants to get the loan guarantees that the U.S. promised the IMF, Shokin has to go, because these investigations into Burisma are not moving as swiftly as we'd like. That would be an email chain that would point more towards my side of, Certainly. They thought that would happen. But conversely, if there was another email chain where people were saying like, listen, this new guy, you could, I don't know what the fuck his name was. Fuck all these names. Okay? But the new prosecutor, Litsenko, when he comes in, okay, the Shokin guy is giving us a really hard time on Burisma. We're getting raked over the coals by this guy, and I think the hammer's about to come down. I think if we get a new prosecutor in here and he's got to look at all the filings again, he's not going to want to dig through this shit, talk to Joe, get Shokin out, get this new guy, and it will be fine. That would point more towards your story, right? If theoretically either of those email chains exist. Okay, yeah, just make sure. So the intention here, regardless of the outcome, the intentionality behind removing Shokin and bringing in the new guy is actually fairly important, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
At the end of the day, right, regardless, we talked about if the new guy comes in and brings the hammer down versus if he comes in and lets them totally off the hook. That would be superseded if we had the smoking gun of what the intention was somehow. Like we have some sort of device where we could go back in time and read the brain of Joe Biden. That would obviously supersede. So is it possible? Yeah, it's possible that it could have been either way, the undesired reaction that came about. So what we do is we say, in my version, and again, I'll try to get you more proof of this, but this was a slap in the rip of Burisma, and Burisma, certainly Burisma was happy about it. They were happy. They celebrated. Zlochevsky comes back after the case is given a slap on the wrist to him. And
well, to be clear, we're talking about they were happy when the investigation ceased, not necessarily when Lysenko came to office, were they?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Kenneth Vogel in the New York Times in 2019 says that he talked to people familiar with the situation in Burisma that said they were happy that Shokin was going because Shokin was trying to get bribes from them. And they didn't like that. And they were happy that Litsenko was the replacement because they knew that they could talk with Litsenko to get this closed.
Okay, that sounds like an okay statement, though, right? Like, if you're happy that a guy's getting kicked out who's literally trying to solicit bribes from you,
correct,
and a new person coming in might be more fair, that theoretically could be good, right?
Yes, and like that's gonna. We can get to that. That's going to be getting into the weeds. So right before we get into that, I just want to say what we would do, though, to determine. So if it's true that the circumstantial evidence that we're looking at says, okay, Burisma got a slap on the wrist, so that leans in a direction but isn't proof, then we would look at the evidence we know around it. So, for example, if they had been bringing up Burisma in the past, which they had, Pyatt brought Burisma up in his September Odessa speech as evidence of corruption, why then would they not speak up when the new prosecutor dropped the case? Why wouldn't they demand his firing?
Wait, when you say why wouldn't they? Who are you talking about?
The same people like Ambassador George Pyatt, people at the State Department like George Kent,
the
Biden
administration.
Yeah.
So then the question would be, were they just, okay, so walk with me for a second here. It sounds absurd, but I think it's probably fair, right? it's probably fair to think that if there's a general assumption of corruption in a country, that some politicians might rail against a company or a thing without actually knowing if they've done anything illegal. So that makes me say, we need to do something about, like, for instance, I bet there are a ton of people in the United States, politicians even, that think that Martin Shkreli did a horrible, evil thing by increasing the cost of diaphragm or whatever, right? But I now, truthfully, I've looked into it a bit, and I think Martin Shkreli is a scumbag. I don't know if it was for the drug pricing or for the looting of companies to pay off other companies and the quasi-Ponzi schemes he ran, right? But that would be a thing where there might be an investigation done into it, and then you find out, oh, this is standard practice for every single medical company, for every single old drug, and there was a lot of reinvestment in R&D. So it might be that that a politician might come out really hard against it. There's a little bit of homework done, and then politicians are mysteriously quiet on it in the future. But it's not because anything weird has happened. It's just that, like, well, there's a general sense of corruption here. It's probably these guys, fuck them. But then once it's dug into a little bit, like, okay, fuck, we don't. Maybe it wasn't that guy, whatever. And then they kind of move on. This is part of the reason why I'm really curious about the Burisma stuff, because knowing what they were accused of in the timeline, I think is really important. Like, if Burisma was accused of indiscriminately slaughtering Ukrainian citizens protesting or whatever, right? That would be a big deal. But if they're accused of like some financial crimes or tax fraud, it could be a big deal, or it could be like I could see why a fine is paid here and it's whatever, you know? Yeah. That's why I'm curious what the general feeling was about it.
Right, and you're right to demand that specific evidence, right? But what you're saying there is contingent upon the conclusion that actually they didn't commit serious crimes, and so the punishment they ended up being given was actually legitimate and fit the crime. I'm saying if we operate outside the scope of that, if we operate based on what it looks like to me, and I think most people would agree that Burisma actually did commit more serious crimes and they were given a slap on the wrist, and we go through the scenario you gave that, like, well, what if hypothetically there was this letter from people at the State Department to Joe Biden that's like, listen, like, we're afraid that this Victor Shokin dude's not going to prosecute Burisma. We need to get him out so we can get a person in there that really will. If they truly believe that, and then they get a new guy in, and one of the first acts the new guy does within 6 months is he's burying this investigation, surely they would speak up. Surely they would be like, wait a minute, now we're going to demand he be fired because he's clearly corrupt. He's doing the exact same thing we complained about Yarima doing, and the exact same thing we complained about Shokin doing. But for some reason, though they demanded the firing of Shokin, they never do anything close to that with Litsenko. They let him in office for 3 years, and basically Litsenko leaves office in disgrace with anti-corruption activists in Ukraine saying he was corrupt. He never did anything to go after.
Sure, and I understand everything you're saying, but I feel like to build off of this, because I'm in the weeds now. I want to be in the weeds, right? That's why I'm asking all these specific questions. I think to really know this, I think it would be really important for us to know exactly the timeline and the accusations and the investigations of what happened with Burisma. Because then from there, because everything you're saying might be true or might be totally irrelevant based on what those accusations and the investigatory process looked like. I think that's like paramount here. It's the most important thing to understand.
I guess I'm relying
for your assumptions, and I'm not faulting you this, but for your assumptions, you're relying on the idea that they were clearly corrupt because everybody was saying it. But if I come to the United States, how many people were saying Russiagate? Right? And you wouldn't say that, like, well, you can't just look at what everybody's saying. You need to read the indictments. You need to examine the Durham report. You need to look at the Mueller investigation. Exactly, right? You wouldn't go by just what is the broad trend. So I think here, I don't think I would go by the broad, like, oh, well, Burisma was clearly in the wrong, especially, no offense to anybody, but when it comes to financial crimes, so many people don't know anything about finance or taxes or financial crimes. So I would just I'd be very interested. And I'll do this reading. We can even do it together. I think it's good to do it together. Is to find out what is the exact timeline of the accusations and investigations of the Burisma stuff.
Yes, and I'll just say real quick, and I don't know if we have time to do that today, but I don't mind doing that.
And we can do it tomorrow or the day after. Like,
I'll reach out to you. But I would say this, right? It's a little different than the Russiagate thing, because in this we have people on opposite sides of the issue. Like, clearly Trump was really trying to go after Joe Biden for this, and then you have the people in the Biden State Department and Biden himself, and both sides are saying, yeah, Burisma's corrupt, right? So it's like with Russiagate that wasn't the case. You had the people defending Trump saying, no, this is horseshit, and the other side saying,
before Trump won the nomination, we had both sides going out. I don't know if it was for Russia-related stuff, but I'm pretty sure you had didn't you have Republican lawmakers that were really critical on Rush, saying like, we'll reward you handsomely for finding the emails and stuff? Like, that was a pretty. There were a lot of people against Trump too, there, right?
Right, but I'm not going to like.
All I'm saying,
want my answer
right now. I'm not arguing to believe it one way or another. I'm just trying to demonstrate to you that, like, I don't think I would rely, if we're going to get into weeds of research, I don't want to rely on like, well, everybody thought this at the time, because listen, do you know how many people died on January 6th?
It was near 3,000, right?
No. How many people died
January
on January
6th. I
6th?
thought
Yeah.
that's 9/11.
Holy shit, yeah. He could have
Shit,
had an erection.
Yeah. 5 people?
Yeah, that's a super commonly held thing. I got destroyed in a debate once of this. It's really one person got shot and died. The other 4 that died probably
Heart
had like heart
attacks
attacks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that was ubiquitous for me. 5 people died. 5 people died, and like I think 4 people were like overweight and had heart attacks. Or like somebody was like on MDMA or meth and like had a heart attack. But there was one person that was truly, maybe 2, if we give a suicide to it, for a cop that had a concussion and then killed himself. I think within the following weeks. Maybe 2. But like, so that would be an example of like, everybody says this, but even on both sides, everybody's saying this, but it's not quite as it seems, you know? So that's why
I totally get it. And we could get into, I will say this, that in my investigation, one of the things that's brutally hard to do is to find sources in Ukraine, partly because I don't speak the language. So when you're like search engineing this, it's very difficult. And partly because they don't keep records as well as like, you know, investigations in the United States. So it's very difficult to find like the stages of exactly what was going on with prosecutors in Ukraine. It might be easier to find exactly when the accusations were first made and what the accusations specifically were, and to have people specifically, I think that you'll see that there are anti-corruption activists in Ukraine that have specifically said, here's the proof we had that they did these things. We could look at their bank accounts and stuff. But for now, I can't do that. I can't provide that now.
That's great. That's fine. Yeah,
so
that's all part of it.
I'm just being honest in why I came to that conclusion, because basically everyone on all sides has came to that conclusion, and it seems to be.
Sure. Okay. And I'll grant that, and then we can look at this later. I'm curious.
The bribe thing. Did you want to talk about the bribe thing?
The bribe thing about Burisma saying that Shokin wanted a bribe or whatever?
Correct.
Oh, not directly, because it's going to come up in this next thing.
Okay.
My next thing would be, I think it would be important to establish what was the reputation of Shokin before and after the Biden call. Yeah, because if it was the case that everybody looked up to him as a prosecutor, and then post the big man in the December call from Dubai, that everything changed, that would be like kind of weird. But if it was the case, like weird in that it would point towards your story being probably more true. But if it was the case that everybody in Ukraine and the United States and Europe was like, this Shokin dude is bad news before Hunter Biden or any of that even happened, then I feel like it points a little bit towards my story. And that's my impression right now. That's pulling extra knowledge. That is my impression. I could be wrong, because like I said, it's good to look exactly at it, but yeah. So
okay, so this is the 2 defenses that are regularly given of Joe Biden's quid pro quo is, 1, there was no investigation. Shokin wasn't investigating Burisma. And 2nd, everyone in the world thought Shokin was a piece of shit and wanted him fired. And so Joe Biden, like when Trump issued a quid pro quo, it was just to benefit himself. But when Joe Biden issued the quid pro quo, he was just going along with established foreign policy that was agreed upon. Right. So that is a defense. Now, I don't think that if it's not dispositive of possible corruption of Joe Biden. It still warrants an investigation, even if all of these people. But here's what I was surprised. I too, when I would debate Pisco on this, I just took his word for it that he over and over would say, well, everyone was, all the world was suggesting this about Shokin. I thought he meant suggesting firing Shokin. I have not seen any evidence from any public documents whatsoever that anyone in the world suggested firing Viktor Shokin other than activists in Ukraine. So not the UK, not the EU, not the IMF, not agencies in the United States, until November 22nd, 2015. The best evidence that I will give you is as follows. I'll try to steelman the other side's case. 1, it is absolutely clear.
Oh, wait. Actually, I don't even care about this. I'm only caring about Rob's brain right now.
Okay.
That's all I want.
Well,
so fuck the steelman. So I'm curious, do you have any statements that were made about Shokin prior to November, December? Like from either from Ukraine or from the United States, or people are like, oh, I think this guy's doing good work. Or do you have any positive, not even necessarily, any positive statements about him? Okay, you don't need these, by the way. I'm just curious if there are any.
So I'll try to do that, and then I'll go to where I was talking. The positive pipe statements we have, I don't think it's necessary, because there's a difference between liking Shokin and saying he should be fired.
And being indifferent. That's what I'm saying. You don't even necessarily need these, but if you did have them, that would be really powerful.
The closest that I have is there was a June 2015 letter that was from Victoria Nuland that was hand-delivered to Shokin, in which she praised anti-corruption activities in the Ukrainian government, but said new progress needed to be made. Now, that doesn't directly say, hey, Shokin, you're the man, you're doing great, but it seems to suggest that she's being at least in general positive to him. That's in June
now,
of
when you say that, I'm drawing from my own corporate experience, and I could be totally wrong, okay? But just from the way that struck my ear is that sounds like criticism. So, for instance, if I'm working at the casino, if the VP of food and beverage is coming through my thing and he is unhappy with it, oftentimes what a communication from my manager would look like, if she wanted to be critical, she's not going to email and go, guys, you're fucking up, okay? We need to do a better job. Usually what it's going to be is, hey, guys, the past few months with the promotion we've been running have been really rough. You guys are doing an amazing job. I'm proud of all of you, but we need to keep moving in a positive direction. I really like that you guys have been cleaning the tables off by 10 p.m. every night. Let's get them done by 9. I like that you guys have kept the bakery and everything organized. Let's deep clean these things twice a week instead of once a week, right? So that would be a letter where it would look positive. And maybe like for non-corporate people on the outside, they go, oh, cool. She's like praising for all the good work you've done. But if you're an employee, though, like, fuck, like obviously they're upset because we didn't do these things.
No, I get I'm giving the caveat. This clearly isn't saying like you're great, Shokin, but one of the things to buttress against what you're saying is it was basically universal over and over and over again in the West that anytime they were dealing with Ukraine, they're like, dude, there's corruption in the prosecutor's office. So when she says improvement needs to be made, this was something that was always going to be said to any prosecutor because that's their official position. So I don't think that this is a unique denigration to Shokin. I don't think she's saying like,
that's fine.
Like,
but then it sounds like it might not be like a unique praise alone.
I'm totally agreeing with that.
Yeah,
I'm totally
not that hurts your case, but I'm just saying.
Right. I totally agree with that. I'm just saying that it's at least of like positive inflection that there's a letter going to Shokin of that in June.
Okay.
The only other thing.
Can I read that letter? Please go link it in chat. Can I just read it? Okay. It's like 1 or 2 pages. Okay.
Yeah, go for it. He sent it to you, or do you want me to send it?
No, I got it. Dear, Mr. Victor Shokin, Prosecutor General of Ukraine. Dear Mr. Prosecutor General, I have the honor to forward to you the enclosed letter from Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, and this is from Jeffrey Piat.
Ambassador, yeah.
Is it Piat or Piat?
I don't know. Piat is what I always say, but I've never heard someone say the name. I just read it.
Dear Mr. Prosecutor General, Secretary Kerry asked me to reply on his behalf to your letter on May 13th, 2015, discussing Ukraine's efforts to address corruption, including through implementation of the new anti-corruption strategy and reform of the Prosecutor General's office. We've been impressed with the ambitious reform and anti-corruption agenda of your government. The challenges you face are difficult but not insurmountable. You have an historic opportunity to address the injustices of the past by vigorously investigating and prosecuting corruption cases and recovering assets stolen from the Ukrainian people. The ongoing reform in your office, law enforcement, and judiciary will enable you to investigate and prosecute corruption and other crimes in an effective, fair, and transparent manner. The United States fully supports your government's efforts to fight corruption. We have dedicated personnel and resources from the State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs and Department of Justice to work with your office on its international changes and to build its capacity through training and modernization. This support includes advisors who are at your disposal to help execute your new strategy and vision. I encourage you to discuss the idea of an anti-corruption advisory body with them, particularly how such an entity would complement, rather than duplicate, the work of the new National Anti-Corruption Bureau. INL and DOJ have been actively involved in standing up this new bureau, which we understand is the government's current priority to combat corruption. The United States Agency for International Development, USAID, also intends to work with the government and civil society on anti-corruption prevention activities. Let me underscore that the United States will continue to support Ukraine, including by working with you and other international partners to identify and address needs in the justice and law enforcement sector. I encourage you to continue to work closely with the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. Sincerely yours, Victoria Nuland. So this reads to me like we're here to help, good luck with your stuff. I don't know if I would say this is a letter of praise, but...
Well, again, I don't think I said that it was specifically praising Shokin necessarily. To me, the more important thing is it seems obvious to me in June they were willing to work with him, were saying they're impressed with some of the direction that the Ukrainian government was doing, and they certainly didn't suggest firing him. Right?
That is true. At this point in June, that is not the suggestion.
Yeah, it's a positive tone. I don't know that there's any evidence that I've seen of people who are like, Shokin, you're awesome. I don't know that I've seen any of that. What we have is, it's sort of like the defense would be, well, if Joe Biden, if other people said that Shokin should be fired, or if they were criticizing Shokin, that would go more in line with a defensive Biden. But I think that
So something that I might dig for that would be interesting for me is I wonder when did criticisms of Shokin begin publicly on a widespread scale beyond just activists in Ukraine? When was his firing, or when did people begin to demand his firing? ? Can I ask you kind of a leading question about this?
Yeah.
Why is it? So let me understand. Your contention is that Biden was pushing for his firing mainly to cover for Burisma because Hunter was making a specific request. Joe Biden might not have even known that it was for Burisma, but we're saying that Joe Biden did it because Hunter was pushing him because Hunter wants to save his company, right?
Correct. That would be, yes.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Why is it that when Biden says on stage that he did this, why would people kind of like cheer and clap?
Well,
Wouldn't it be that everybody would kind of look at him like, why are you so happy you got rid of this guy? Did he even do anything that bad? Why did it seem like the general reception to that was so positive?
Well, it wouldn't. Look, it's a fair question, right? One, because it's the Council on Foreign Relations and they're supporting Biden, and I think most of the applause wasn't that he took this action. It was that he was sounding like a tough guy. It was like a wrestler giving a promo.
It was basically like Gorbachev tear down this wall moment.
Right,
for Biden.
son of a
That's
bitch, they did it, right? And that's kind of, everyone's laughing that's there. So I don't dispute that there are people afterwards, after Shokin was fired, that say, yeah, that's a good thing. The question I have is, were they calling for that firing beforehand? Because saying afterwards, them agreeing, isn't the same defense as saying, well, they wanted him fired before. So when
that's what I'm saying. Before November, December of 2015, it would be interesting to see if there were criticisms of Shokin. Yeah?
Correct. And so there are certainly criticisms in Ukraine. As far as I'll just give I'll cut to the punchline. As far as I know, Pisco has been the person that has looked at this the most, that is trying to give the evidence for people calling for the firing of Shokin beforehand. Here's the 3 or 4 pieces of evidence that he's given me. A Financial Times article that names an unnamed official that says that U.S. officials and EU officials were in contacts about firing Shokin in April of 2014. That seems ludicrous because that's only a month into his term. So I can't believe that would be the case. That seems insane. Wait.
Well, couldn't it be the case that he had already had a bad reputation because he was part of the prior AG's office, or PGO, I guess they call it, office?
It could be, right? But the question would become, right, like, who would you get that wouldn't? Like, when they come in with Lutsenko, right, Lutsenko didn't even have a law degree, right? They basically had to change the rules of who was allowed to be prosecutor general just to allow him. Lutsenko had been imprisoned previously in Ukraine because he had a government position that he was accused of exploiting to enrich himself. So everyone, the Ukrainian activists are all like, as soon as they pointed at Lutsenko, they all rolled their eyes. They're like, are you shitting me? Like, this dude, he's Poroshenko's friend. He's not going to do anything. And they all think Poroshenko's the problem, right? That Poroshenko himself was the one that was directing prosecutors to solicit bribes and things like that. So the question would be, if it's weak evidence anyways to suggest that anonymous officials were talking in the background in April. But
I would hold on, just to be fair, I would caution you for saying anonymous officials directly commenting supposedly on what they felt, that's weak. However, your confidential human source is strong evidence for you that Zlochevsky bragged about making payments directly to the Bidens, right? Because that's also unvetted, unverified intelligence from that report.
Well,
right?
no,
to be fair,
it's two different levels, though. A confidential human source, he's confidential to me and you, but he's known to the FBI. The FBI knows that person is.
But that report, that form that you pointed to, that form is specifically for unvetted intelligence. Remember, unvetted intelligence is we went to war with Iraq over unvetted intelligence. Now, I'm not saying it's true or not true.
That's
I'm just saying
certainly
we should probably
true.
have similar burdens of evidence behind. Because keep in mind, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Steele was pretty trusted, and there were a lot of confidential human sources behind a lot of the Steele dossier that, like the P tapes, that probably isn't true now, right? So I would just say we have to be cautious about putting a lot of stock into that. Not that you should disregard it entirely, but just I think we should be fair.
Okay, there's two different points here to make. To reference the Steele point, right? The problem with Steele was Steele wasn't saying, I was told this by the person involved in the crime. Steele was saying, I was told by someone who was told that a crime happened. And that primary subsource, when they talked to that person, basically said, this is all bullshit. That's not what we have in the case of the 1023, where a confidential human source says, I was directly told by Zlochevsky. Now, you could absolutely be right. And one of the arguments that people make, and this is a credible argument, is Zlochevsky's full of shit. Zlochevsky, like, if you think Biden's a braggart, Zlochevsky's this dude that's running around the world saying all kinds of bullshit. Like, he's a bullshitter. So he could just be talking like a big man. Oh, yeah, I bribed Joe Biden. That doesn't mean it's true. You would still need to find proof. But I think there's reason to investigate based on that claim. That's all I'm saying. That's a different level of evidence than an anonymous official, not in an official government document or something like that, not that's known by the FBI and deemed credible by the FBI, talking to the Financial Times saying we talked to other anonymous officials. That's as low of a standard of evidence as you could get, as far as I know, especially when it'll be contradicted by things that I'll tell you here in the future.
Sure. Yeah, go for it. Give me the contradiction.
So the second piece of evidence is both Victoria Nuland and George Kent at the State Department both testified in the Trump impeachment hearings that they, in, I believe, early fall of 2015, were in conversations with people in the EU, the UK, etc., about firing Shokin. They haven't provided any public documents that showed that this was the official position of the EU, UK, but they have testified that they were in talks with people at the EU to fire Trump or Shokin.
Fire Shokin. And this was, when did they say they were in
early
talks
fall
for this? Of
2015.
2015. Okay. Oh, so this had been before the Hunter Biden calls, right?
Correct. Because the allegation is this. There was this email sent out November 2nd telling Hunter Biden and Devon Archer it's time to reach out to prominent U.S. officials to sway people in Ukraine like the prosecutor general with the ultimate goal of closing these investigations. Then December 4th, we have the actual call. We need you to call your dad to deal with pressure from Ukrainian government investigations, right? So that in late November, the official Biden position changes to we want Shokin fired. And then after the December 4th call, the official position changes to we're going to condition his firing on the receival of this $1 billion. So the question is, were there people calling for his firing prior to that? If Victoria Nuland and George Kent are right, yes, sometime, I don't know what you would deem early fall.
And
late
Nuland
August.
And Kent, when they testified this testifying was under oath?
Correct. I would assume.
That's pretty, sure. So that's pretty strong, right?
Sure. That's certainly a stronger level of evidence than the Financial Times are. I would say that. But the question is then, two things could be true at the same time. It could be that they were in talks with some individuals, but that doesn't mean that it was the official policy. So what we should do is look to see, is there contemporaneous information that has came out since that was either public or that we've been able to get through Freedom of Information Act that shows, yes, the EU, the UK, their official policy was to do this, or we have email exchanges with people saying, we don't have any of that.
On this, so then like the smoking gun question on my side would be, can we see like a clear action or a delineation of behavior where people were like, Shokin needs to go because of this or that or that? That's not at all related to Hunter, basically, right? That's what we're...
Yeah, there was none of that until after the quid pro quo was offered in December. And so the one last piece of evidence I'll give you that I've seen cited is a guy by the name of...
Also, to be clear, that I don't like quid pro quo. That's the allegation. That's not what was...
No. I've had this argument before. I think the quid pro quo, unless I'm massively wrong, the quid pro quo absolutely happened. That just means basically tit for tat. We give you something for something in exchange.
That's true. The connotation of quid pro quo. So, for instance, like if I go to a car auto body shop and I get my car fixed, and then I see that like they missed a part of my bumper. They used the wrong paint. And I'm like, listen, I gave you like $500. I'm not going to pay you the $500 until you finish painting my bumper, right? And they go, okay, fine, we'll do it. Nobody would call that a quid pro quo, right? That was an agreed upon. We had a contract. They failed to uphold it. And I said, I'm not going to pay unless you do this thing that you promised to. I don't think would you agree that that's a quid pro quo, or would you say, no, that's not a quid pro quo?
I would say that you could call it a quid pro quo if I'm understanding you. Like in the sense of
you can say that, but I don't think anybody else would use
What's the first time you ever heard the term? For me, it was Silence of the Lambs, right? You tell me something, I tell you something.
Yeah, that basically to me, it sounds like I scratch your back, you scratch my back. But I've never heard quid pro quo used in like an on the books, like contractual kind of way. Like I would never hear somebody say like, oh yeah, we just signed a contract with this business. It's awesome. We've got the best quid pro quo ever with them. I've never heard that in my life.
Okay, I think that I think that it,
because by that
we could
definition,
use
every
whatever
single
term.
agreement ever. Well, sure, but no, it's not. We could use whatever because like it would kind of be like saying tell me like how is your you and your girlfriend's relationship so good? And you go, oh well, I manipulate her all the time. And you're like, what do you mean manipulate her? It's like, yeah, in the morning I see her and I tell her I love her so that she knows that I love her, and I tell her that she's pretty because I think she's beautiful and I want her to know that. And like, and I'm telling her that, I mean, because I feel that way, but also because I know it makes her feel good. Well, is that manipulation? I don't think, because in that case, every single interaction we have with somebody is manipulation. Same thing with the way you're defining quid pro quo. Every single contractual agreement then is a quid pro quo.
That's probably true. Most contractual agreements probably are quid pro quos. I would say quid pro quo in this sense, like my wife says, I'll make dinner if you mow the yard. That's a quid pro quo. It doesn't imply malicious intent, but whatever. The point I'm trying to make is this. It is whatever you want to say. To me, quid pro quo is like this for that. That's what happened. Joe Biden said, you have to get rid of this guy, then you get the money. They got rid of the guy, they got the money. You could say, well, that's perfectly legitimate. That's how U.S. foreign policy is done. We give something, but we ask something in return. All I'm saying is we gave something and asked something.
This is also something that's really important is the argument on the Biden's favor is that Biden was not making a unique demand, that this was already part of the established policy for how they were getting those loan guarantees, right?
Yeah, but that still wouldn't mean it's not a quid pro quo. It would just be a legitimate one.
Sure, we can call it that, but I'm saying that like the difference here, right? The difference in assertion is that, and this is on my side, this is what we claim, is that when Donald Trump tried to do a quid pro quo, Donald Trump was putting a new condition in front of Ukraine to access congressionally approved aid. When Biden did his quote unquote quid pro quo, he was just reasserting the contractual terms that the Ukrainian government had already agreed to.
Well,
so those are two.
Well,
if you believe the official story, those are two very different things. Now, you might disagree that that's actually what happened, but the stated story, the official narrative, those are two very different types of quid pro quos.
Well, I disagree because you could make the same argument for Trump. You could say if Trump, they contractually were signed on as a condition of receiving aid that they had to root out corruption and stuff. And so if Trump's team truly thought that there was corrupt behavior, that the United States had given this $1 billion to fire a prosecutor to help corrupt oligarchs in Russia, you could say that that was also part of a contractual obligation, right?
And if that was the case, that could be true, but I don't think we got strong evidence for that. And also, I could be wrong, but this is my understanding of the difference, is that the United States had given loan guarantees to Ukraine. Was it for $1 billion? I think it was. We were going to guarantee the loans that the IMF was going to give to Ukraine,
for $1
right?
billion.
So that and essentially, if the U.S. didn't guarantee these, the IMF probably wouldn't have given them the loan, right? But the issue was because we had feelings of corruption or something there, that our standards weren't being met, and that was explicitly part of that agreement, that you need to weed out corruption for this loan guarantee to work. It was explicitly part of that agreement, right? And Obama had delegated the authority to Biden to go on Ukraine and negotiate these issues, okay? However, when it came to Donald Trump, my understanding is that congressionally approved aid, none of that was conditional on any type of weeding out corruption or anything for what Congress approved. Was it? Am I wrong on that?
I don't know.
Be a point where
I will say this. I've not seen evidence that said it was. I would think that it would be implicit, that we would think that it is within the power of the executive before disclosing money, that it's within their rights to assure that it won't be used for corrupt or nefarious purposes.
Okay, because that's a pretty important part, right? I think.
Well, you could say that it's a decision, but that's sort of jumping around a little. It's not what we're talking. You could say, well, that's a reason to justify the impeachment inquiry of Donald Trump based on his quid pro quo. It's different, but it doesn't excuse the alleged or the quid pro quo of Biden. You could say
sure.
Because
I'm just saying that. I understand what you're saying, and if this was done for Hunter Biden, obviously all of this is bad.
Correct.
But I'm just saying that like what's on paper is the official narrative for what the Democrats believe Biden did and what the Democrats believe Trump did is quite different. One is the vice president who had the authority to tell Ukraine that they had made an agreement for the U.S. to back this aid. They had to weed this corruption out. And it's purportedly the United States and Europe all agree that there was corruption there. Biden saying, if you want the aid, you've got to fulfill these terms you already did. That's meaningfully different than Trump making a phone call and saying, listen, Congress approved aid. There aren't these strings attached to it, but I'm going to attach strings if you don't do something. Those are meaningfully different interactions.
I'll have to. The way you're explaining it would be meaningfully different. I don't think that it describes whether or not what Biden did was legitimate. And I also don't know what the process was of the congressional approval for this aid and whether or not that was part of the congressional understanding that they signed
so
off
you
and
can,
said, I don't know. But I don't know that it's really important to the
I think it's really important.
You think?
But I think that, like, so this is an email I got where a couple paragraphs, okay? And then you can, if you find anything other end, I'd be super curious to hear this. And it doesn't have to be today, it can be tomorrow, whatever. So he said, when Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion, he absolutely had the authority because it was a loan guarantee that we're planning to give to Ukraine but hadn't given yet. It wasn't congressionally approved aid. It would have been the third one that they'd done. Any money the U.S. put up was expected to be paid back. The guarantee was done with the president's treaty powers and was backed by U.S. aid, which, as far as I can tell, the only authority Congress has over U.S. aid is their budget. But the president has authority over their operations, and Obama had delegated that authority to Joe Biden. Shokin was fired on March 2016, and the third loan guarantee was then signed on June 2016. And then he links where you can read about the loan guarantee, and then you can read where the authority is guaranteed to the president for U.S. aid and everything. And then note that they all come with conditions in Annex 2. Notably, the third one includes this. And the subsection here is Ukraine shall provide to USAID a copy of the comprehensive regulation adopted by the Prosecutor General, which ensures the independent operations of the Office of the Inspector General of the Prosecutor General's Office. The regulation shall clearly define the PGO-IG's jurisdiction, powers, and authority to enable it to perform its functions in a manner that is effective and credible and that increases the accountability of the PGO to the public. The regulation shall conform to the draft regulation endorsed by the U.S. Department of Justice. So
I don't.
Now, again, I'm just saying
say
that
that all that's
official
true. I've never made arguments to the contrary.
Gotcha.
I don't see what the relevance is to the story we're telling. The best that I can see what that gets is like, well, then your initial position of withholding the loan was reason to impeach Trump would still be a reason to impeach Trump. I don't see how it has any bearing whatsoever because we would still say, despite the fact that that could be a condition of the loan guarantee, if it was done for nefarious purposes or if it was done outside the scope of what was expected and planned for based on established U.S. foreign policy or our allies' foreign policy, then it wouldn't matter anyways. So,
I 1,000,000% agree with you, but I'm just saying that when it came to Biden withholding or threatening to withhold that loan guarantee, everybody was on the same page.
Well, that's not true.
The United States. What do you mean? Wait, what's not true?
Well, because let me finish real quick. The last piece of evidence.
Wait. I don't want to hear like the narrative of the future. I'm just saying what isn't true about what I just said.
Because it feels like I'll tell you exactly. There's an interagency task force that was designed with analyzing what was going on with Ukraine, including people from the Treasury Department, the State Department, the Ambassador's Office, etc. In October of 2015, they said that they still recommended giving the loan. That they saw some progress, but they needed more efforts as well.
Oh, no. I understand that. I'm sorry. When I say everybody's on the same page, When I say everybody's on the same page, what I mean is that everybody in the world agrees that Vice President Joe Biden had the authority to make this loan contingent upon perceived corruption. Now, whether or not the perceived corruption was real or whether they agreed on that, that's up for debate, I guess. But everybody around the world agreed that Joe Biden had the authority, if he was to believe or Obama was to believe that corruption existed, he had the authority to make those funds contingent on fixing that. Do you agree with that?
Not only do I agree with that, I would say that that's probably implicit in loan guarantees that are guaranteed for Congress.
True. Okay, but even if there was corruption in Ukraine relating to Hunter Biden, I don't believe anybody agrees that Donald Trump had unilateral authority to withhold aid to Ukraine on the contingency of some investigation. I don't think anybody agrees with that, do they?
There's probably a legal argument by people smarter than me that have investigated it that could go back and forth on this. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, I concede and say, okay, I still don't see the relevance to this situation with Britain. All of that would just be reason to impeach Trump.
Sure. Well, because one of the phrases that you like to use, I'm not accusing you of bad faith, but one of the phrases you like to use a lot is, this is where you offered a quid pro quo like Trump. And what I think is interesting is that when we look at the actions that Biden took, everybody was on the same page that he had the authority to take those actions. I believe that nobody agrees. I don't think legal scholars, Supreme Court, anybody. I don't think anybody agrees that Trump had the authority to withhold aid. I think that's just one, before we even move on to any conspiracy, anything, I think that's an important thing to distinguish. I don't think Donald Trump had the authority to unilaterally withhold congressionally approved aid from another country for this purpose. Okay, even if it was the case that, let's say I grant everything happened exactly as you said, Shokin was fired because Hunter Biden was begging his dad to protect something. Even if all that happened, Donald Trump still would have been impeachable for making that request.
Okay, so I'll just say this, right? Like, I think that I would certainly agree. Whoever wrote you that paragraph, that sounds reasonable to me. That congressional approved aid is different than USAID or something like that. Like, it sounds reasonable. I'm not saying I know that's true, but for the sake of argument, it sounds reasonable. I don't see any reason to say that that's not accurate. I would just say, again, I don't see how this is relevant to the Biden situation. And I'll say, at the risk of getting down a further rabbit hole, the difference in these quid pro quos was Biden's is an admitted quid pro quo, and there was not a complete quid pro quo offered by Trump. They said it was implicit. He never said, do this or you won't get the money. He said, we're giving you money. We want to work with you. We're wondering about this investigation. So that's not, I'm sure Trump's team would say, well, we gave the money. It wasn't an actual quid pro quo. The Democrats have said, but it was implied. So again, I don't know where to go. I don't know what the relevance.
Sure, I understand that we can look at that, and I know that you're saying I don't understand the relevance. Although I will say, yesterday you wanted to bring up there's a double standard with the investigation. There's a double standard in the FBI. They did Trump, blah blah blah. So you seem like you were keen to bring up Trump yesterday. But I'm just trying to be on the same page right now that, like, if Joe Biden did something wrong, the wrong thing that he did was defending his son's business. But
Correct.
Procedurally, everything seems to be on the up and up. Whereas for Trump, procedurally, things were not on the up and up, regardless of who was right or wrong about the underlying facts of the matter.
Okay, but again, procedurally, in that they have the authority to do something, you would still have to do it for the right reasons. Like, just because Biden has the authority, you would agree that if he did it to benefit his son, then it's illegal.
Biden did it because if Biden said, I want every prostitute in the country for my son, and you're not going to get this loan guarantee unless it happens, then I would say that's, even if procedurally he's correct, that would be bad. Correct.
Right. Yeah. So, and I'm just real quick, the comparing to Trump was comparing investigative techniques such as from the FBI, how they treated Trump versus how they treated Biden. An impeachment inquiry is a completely different thing. That's completely different. That's a political process, So, at the end of the day, I thought it was ridiculous that they impeached Trump over this phone call, and now they're fighting impeachment inquiries right now over Biden. But that's completely different than what I was talking about, like the FBI getting FISA warrants and stuff on Trump versus accusations that we have from whistleblowers that they're literally covering up from the Bidens, and they didn't investigate the Bidens with all of the information we had. If I could finish the defense real quick, there was another guy named, I could mess up the first name, George Erbst. This is the last evidence I have of people saying fire Shokin before November. Erbst was the former ambassador to Ukraine before Ambassador Pyatt. And Erbst worked for the Atlantic Council, and he is in an interview in October of 2015 saying Shokin's trash, he should be fired. I've heard that people are talking, officials are talking in the United States and Europe about firing him. Herbst is going to be really difficult to take at his word, though, because Herbst's working for the Atlantic Council. After Shokin gets fired, right, and Litsenko comes in and basically gives Burisma a slap on the wrist, this guy, Erbst, the former ambassador from the United States to Ukraine, who works for the Atlantic Council, one of the most prolific and influential think tanks in the United States that works with the government. You know what they did? They went into a business partnership with Burisma.
Sure, but this is now we're on. I don't care about any of this something.
Well, okay, but I'm just saying that's reason to dispute. Now, weighing against that is none of them have any official documentation that showed that there was official policy or even emails showing any sort of contemporaneous evidence other than their word that people were calling for Shokin. And the two things we have, we have to argue against it real quick, because I do have to leave in 10 minutes. The two things we have to argue against it are, one, this October interagency memo that was the official policy from all of these agencies in the United States to what to do with these loan guarantees. This is in October. It never once mentions firing Shokin. So if they decided if they were having these,
I understand. I agree with everything you're saying. So, but then this just returns us to the two big questions that I had, and then we can both do our research and read or whatever together. We can do this together because it's fun doing this together. My big question is the Burisma investigation timeline, and then my second big question is everybody's thoughts and feelings on Shokin and when do they change.
Okay,
I think those are like the two things where when those timelines get ironed out, they significantly point us, I think, more towards your direction or more towards the other direction.
Right, and I'll just say real quick, the other evidence we have is from the EU. So there was a memo that was just released last week, an official, I don't know what it is, like a task force in the EU that was also looking into benchmarks being made in the Ukraine. And they have a section on anti-corruption benchmarks. And in that it says, this is in December of 2015, the EU officially looking into anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine. And it says, going good, anti-corruption benchmarks being met. This is in December, so this is after Biden's team says we want Shokin fired. And they never once, they say benchmarks are being met and never once suggest firing Shokin. So if it's true that all of these people around the world in the UK, in the EU, in the IMF are
I
privately
understand you're giving me
saying,
lots of stories, but none of these matter because I just want to know like you're giving me like the narratives. I know you like to do this for stream and stuff, but like I'm just saying like I need to know the underlying facts because everything you're saying could either be a really neat way to tie together everything in a way that makes sense, or if these underlying facts are significantly different, then nothing you're saying matters, and I would completely disagree with the narrative.
What underlying fact are you talking about? This memo exists or it doesn't, right?
Yeah, but there might be other statements made relating to Shokin or other things that were relevant to the Burisma investigation that would dramatically impact how
that's
we feel
absolutely
about.
true. But again,
So
the
I'm saying that we
impetus.
should, that,
But listen, the impetus is not on me. I'm not the one making the affirmative for the.
Yeah, sure. I agree that it's not necessarily on you, but that's what I'm saying. I need to read and research more to find these. Facts,
But listen real quick. It's not that the impetus isn't on me. The impetus is on the people that are saying, because we're like, we should all agree to this. With all other facts, if we just have this basic scenario, there is a vice president. He uses tax dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor that was tasked with investigating his son's company. That's something that warrants investigation. The defense as to why it's not is, one, Shokin wasn't investigating, which we could get to at a later date. And second, everyone in the world wanted Shokin fired. And so when the evidence for everyone in the world wanting Shokin fired is, well, George Kent said so and Victoria Nuland said so. They haven't provided any evidence to prove it, but they both testified to it. Okay, well, we'll weigh that against actual documents from government agencies we see that are saying benchmarks are being met and they're not recommending firing.
But you're doing the thing again where you're giving me the narrative, and these are like the facts that I would really like to iron out. So I understand what you're saying. What you're saying might be true.
I welcome that because the problem is, not the problem, but what I've asked people like Pisco that I've debated this for is like, it is entirely possible that eventually we'll find another document that says, here's a UK document, to the ambassador saying we want Shokin fired in September. That could exist. But right now we don't see it. So the defense of, everyone wanted him fired, that case hasn't been proven. So as far as I'm concerned, that defense, the burden of proof's on the people making that affirmative claim. They haven't met that.
We're repeating ourselves. I agree with that, but that's why I would like to search for that proof. I would like to.
Well, I hope you find it. Yeah, that would be nice.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look together. Yeah.
All right. So I gotta head out. I don't know if I'll be able to stream tomorrow, Saturday. I got a wedding Saturday, but I'll let you know.
Who's getting married?
It's not even. It is my sister-in-law's former best friend. So,
Jesus Christ!
Yeah.
Is this a fucking huge wedding, or you just have to be close friends?
Yeah, it's they live like 3 houses down from us, so I think we got invited out of pity. But it'll be okay. I'll probably be designated driver. But I'll reach out to you when I'm available, and if you're streaming, we could do more of it. But Monday night, I'm supposed to be debating Pisco on this, and I believe Erudite's moderating it. I'll stream it in my channel. I assume Erudite will be streaming it. So if you catch the VOD of that or something, you could. I'm sure some of this will be discussed as well. So,
okay, all right.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You guys have a great day. I'm gonna head out and do some yard lawn work here. So,
okay, be careful.
All right,
wait, what state do you live in?
Pennsylvania.
Okay, have fun. Be careful.
We'll see you.
Bye.
Okay, got to end here. I do have to go. So I'm supposed to be streaming at 8 p.m. tonight as well for like an hour. My wife's gonna kill me, but it's unfortunate that it took so long to actually start that conversation because I'd like to continue it and have it further. I understand what Destiny's trying to do, and I don't think that's bad faith or anything to try to get the facts outlined as possible. But I think that you could clearly see that one of the things that I'm accused of jumping around, I think that he was jumping around a lot, like, Trump's quid pro quo and stuff like that. We weren't really focusing on that at the time. Centrally, what he's trying to get is something that I think will be easy to prove, that basically everyone in the world thought Burisma was guilty. And I got a concession from him that he would admit that that wouldn't be positive then evidence that Joe Biden definitely was corrupt, but it would speak more to it. And I think that I'll be able to prove that case. Whether I'll be able to find specific evidence of the actual allegations that they specifically did and proof that like he embezzled X number of dollars, that's a different standard. But I think what you'll see is even the people that would defend Joe Biden in the State Department, they're all going to agree, like, yeah, Burisma was really corrupt. So I'm confident in that position. Other than that, we started to get to the meat and potatoes of the sort of, everyone said that they wanted Shokin fired. And I think that I got the admission from Destiny there where he just says, I need to do more research. Totally fine. He could do more research. I think I steel manned Pisco's position and the left's position quite well. I tried to outline every example I've heard that people said fire Shokin. I'm unpersuaded by that, given that we have documents that came out after that aren't calling for the firing of Shokin. I think Destiny admits at this point that he wants to do more research, but as of right now, he does not think that defensive case has been made, which I totally agree with that. And so where we stand right now is, and as he admitted at the beginning, that he would agree with, that he could understand someone like me saying there should be an investigation. Of course, I go further than that because I say that this investigation isn't something that should have been brought up as an impeachment inquiry. It should have been something that the FBI was doing at the time. There should have been an immediate investigation as soon as this quid pro quo was offered. As far as the semantic definition of quid pro quo and stuff like that, I don't understand. To me, that's just a total red herring. When I say quid pro quo, again, if I said, hey, my wife gave me a quid pro quo, she said, if you mow the grass, I'll make dinner, that has no nefarious intent. People hear the word quid pro quo and assume that what I'm saying is it's been proven there was a quid pro quo, and what they think is I'm saying it's been proven that Biden was corrupt. No, you could do a non-corrupt quid pro quo. The admission of the quid pro quo actually happened, though. Like, we didn't see that necessarily with Trump. Trump didn't directly say, do this or else. He didn't say that, right? And so that's what makes it different there. Am I getting on Destiny's show tonight? No. There's someone named Pentuple that I'm going to stream with for an hour, and he's a new streamer, and we're going to talk about his foray into politics and why Donald Trump brought him into there. So he was generous on my chat there last week and asked if I would do a stream with him, and I said sure. So, all right, until 8 p.m. tonight, I am out. I hope you all enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe. If you're on Twitter, X, or anything like that, if you clip anything or just want to share, the video of this, I would really appreciate it. Thanks so much, everyone. I got to go. As always, have a good one.